go first into a roll call with Secretary Johnson, please.
Member Karen? Hearing Member Karen. Vice Chair Ekstrom? Not hearing Vice Chair Ekstrom. Member Evans? Uh-oh, we're not hearing people. Secretary Johnson, I'm here. Chair Proietti?
Here.
Member Wall?
Here.
Mayor Wiedegardner? We do not have a quorum of people at least capable of saying that they're here.
Any members that are on the line that didn't identify that they're here, please do so now.
Karen Gaudette.
Nope, we're looking for school committee members. I'm sorry.
Okay. I thought that Susan Hollins was here.
Susan Hollins, are you on the line?
If they are here, they're apparently having technical difficulties with their ability to say that they're here. I do see Susan Hollins' name on the list in 2 instances.
I see the superintendent.
Let me get one.
Okay. Mayor Wiedegardner, are you on the line?
Can't hear anything.
We can hear you.
How about Member Karen? We'll try you again. Member Karen, are you on the line?
I'll check the school committee email, see if people are writing in with problems.
I didn't see any. I will remind everyone who's on the line, we are trying to get started, and when you enter the meeting, you are automatically put on mute. Your microphone is put on mute. I do see a bunch of people who are with us that do not have their microphones on mute, and I actually ask you to do that now. Otherwise, the audio quality of the meeting is vastly reduced for everyone. So if you're not on mute, please do that. Thank you. I see Susan Hollins. Member Hollins, please tell us that you're here so we can have our quorum. You're on mute. You have to be able to talk, so we've got to work that out. I suggest, Member Hollins, that you put your phone, are you using phone for audio and computer for the video?
I also don't want to have to wait 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything.
All right, people, we really got to get a roll call here. We got tons of folks on the line. Any school committee member that can speak up and say they are here, please.
I'm assuming they're having technical difficulties, and I have a proposed solution. I could hang up, come back in, dial in for audio and conference people.
The meeting is at capacity?
I was in, but I couldn't hear you guys. So I logged out to try logging back in, and now I can't get in.
So what do we do?
I have no idea. I've never used Cisco before. And I think maybe you ask people if they could watch, if they're not presenting, if they could listen in or watch on CCTV.
Okay. All right, let's try that. Yep, let's try that. Okay, thanks. I'm going to hang up. Bye.
I have a different proposal, Amy.
Well, people who are trying to log in now are being told that the meeting is at capacity, which my understanding was is not possible. So I'm not sure what is going on. What I would please suggest to folks who are on the line and they are, or if you're logged in to the WebEx and you are not planning to public comment, it would be helpful for all of us to be able to participate if you could actually disconnect from the WebEx and do a call-in or watch through the GCTV feed online through YouTube or through their website, or they're also, I think, broadcasting on Facebook. But people do need to disconnect if they're not planning to do public comment and find another way to actually connect with the meeting.
Okay, people are doing.
Thank you.
This is
And people are
Holland.
asking.
Can you hear me?
Oh, who's that? Who's that? Susan Holland?
Susan Holland, she's.
Yep, you got to turn one of them off.
Yeah. Can you?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but there's a lot of feedback. I think you likely have your computer audio and your phone audio on at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. So we can put member Collins down as present.
You can put me down as present.
We got to get rid of that feedback though, Susan. It's really bad.
I turned off my phone.
Oh
my God.
Jeez.
Yes. This is Susan Farber. Would it be useful if I give the names of people who are not yet muted, who need to mute?
Oh, please. I see one. Only because this person's on my screen, I'm not calling them out
Yes.
specifically, but Julie Erickson,
Please,
you need to
please.
mute yourself.
Please
I'm only
check
calling
your
people out if I
settings
see
and
them.
mute yourself.
Someone named
Lauren
Dorothy.
Rice. Ashley. Many people using their phones. Mute your phone, please.
Is that better?
No. The host has the ability to mute everyone. Whoever's typing that in the chat. That was done. That was already done. Thank you.
I'm going to call in. You can go ahead. I'm going to send them on video.
Elwell, please mute. GCTV. Oh, sorry, you are muted. JBHAR, please mute yourself.
That's the superintendent.
Julie Erickson. Karen Dodd, please mute yourself. Katie Irazani. No, sorry, I terribly mispronounced your name. Irizarry, sorry about that.
Yeah, member Karen is
Kelly
not able to
Halpin.
get into the meeting.
Kelly Halpin, please mute yourself. Lynette Baker, please mute yourself. If you are connected by phone, mute yourself, please. Denise Elwell, please mute yourself. Karen Dodd, please mute your device. Kelly Halpin. Michael Browning, please mute. Melissa Stalafano, please mute. Melissa Beck, oh, sorry, Melissa, you're muted now. Yay.
Okay, I would like to try again to do the roll call so we could actually have the meeting. Member Johnson, would you be so kind?
Member Karen.
Oh,
Not hearing member Karen. Vice Chair Ekstrom.
Yes.
Member Holland. Definitely
Here.
Member Holland, you got to fix that. You're still echoing.
Member Hollins, when I come with the roll call, please call me and I will help you troubleshoot. Okay, 413-522-5409. Secretary Johnson, I'm here. Chair Proietti, you are
Here.
here. Member Wall? And Mayor Weidergardner? No Mayor Weidergardner, but we have a quorum.
Okay, we're gonna assume Member Weidergartner will join us if she's able. And we're gonna actually get started. Probably should call the meeting to order revised at 6:10, but I digress. So we're going to move into public comment. We're going to keep this orderly. The first thing every public commenter should know is you have a maximum of 3 minutes, and we will time you, and we will actually ask you to complete your thought and finish your comment. We're going to first start with people who have called in to the meeting, meaning people who are on telephone only and not also with us on video. And we ask that you identify yourselves. We can start now. Anyone who wants to identify themselves and go first.
Anyone on the phone whose last name starts with A?
Or A through L. I'm going to move on. Anyone wanting to make public comment from a telephone?
Susan Ekstrom, are you saying you can't hear? She was making sign language.
Okay, moving on to people who are on the video portion of the call who would like to make public comment. I did see a chat from Member Ekstrom that she can't hear anything.
May I comment?
Oh, sure. Is it Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And I have your name. Rachel, if you would be so kind as to tell us your full name and what town you live in, and then you have 3 minutes to comment, and Member Johnson will time you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Rachel Cronin Townsend. I live in Greenfield, Massachusetts. I've been teaching in Greenfield for more than 20 years. I've taught at every elementary school, and I currently teach at the middle school. In addition, I am a parent at the high school. I have more than 2 decades of experience with online learning. I am one of the very first people to obtain certification by the International Society of Technology Educators, and I have a degree in human development and family studies. I'm a technology teacher. I love the ways technology, this is terrible, this beeping.
That
I love
beeping is
the way-
from when people are entering or exiting the meeting. I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it.
Okay. Ironically, I love the ways technology can be used to enhance student learning. And now, during this global pandemic, the use of technology to support student learning is even more important. But it is not paramount. It is developmentally inappropriate to expect that our students can be successful learners using a fully remote learning environment. Students need access to in-person instruction and support. Some students have families at home that can provide them this in-person instruction. Most do not. We need a hybrid solution for learning that allows students who need it access to educators who can help them navigate online learning. With that said, the access needs to be safe. Student and teachers should not be inside buildings. 6 feet should be a minimum, not a suggestion. Teachers and students should all have access to appropriate PPE. Every student from kindergarten through grade 12 should be part of a small cohort with either a classroom or advisory teacher whose job it is to help the student navigate the challenges of remote and online learning. There are parks and playgrounds all over Greenfield. We can set up large tents and outdoor classrooms everywhere. Cohort groups can be based on where students live. This way, we do not need to crowd students onto buses. Teachers can come to them, but not every teacher. Some teachers can focus on remote learning only, developing and providing the online instructions. Some teachers can be the ones to meet and support the students' offline needs, and some teachers can do both. It is unfortunate that most of the learning our students do this year needs to be done on the computer, but it does not, nor should it be all of it. If we do not meet our students in person, most of them will suffer. I would rather give every student in Greenfield a year off than see us try and meet their educational needs without meeting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to try one more time. People who are calling in, we've already asked for people who have called in on the phone that want to do
Hello,
public
could I-
comment. They should speak up now. Is that someone who wants
Could
to
I offer
comment?
something? Yeah.
Rachel, can you mute
Hello.
yourself?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you. Who is that that's speaking? Go ahead.
This is Scott Keldon. I'm a resident of Greenfield. My son attends elementary school here in town.
Scott, hang on
And
for
we've
one
had,
second. Hang on for 1 second. I need to clarify your last name. Your last name, please. Just repeat.
It's Keldon, Keldun.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
I appreciate the comments that were just made, and the second part of the comments, I guess, speak most to me. I would rather our kids also miss school than anyone get sick or die from COVID, and I can't imagine, no matter how safe we are, that someone in our school system is not going to get sick with this illness based on the way it's been spreading in our country. Especially with children who we would need to follow rules that it's probably going to be a challenge. So I just want to voice that, understanding that this is an incredible challenge that our community faces, and that I know there's no easy answer for this. But if I thought there would be a vaccine in a year and my child had to miss 1 year of school but not risk getting anyone sick or himself sick or any family member, to me that's kind of more a priority. So I just wanted to voice that. And I appreciate all the hard work everybody's been doing in the schools and at the government level. But I'm really concerned about people getting sick if they go back to school.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Anyone else who is on the line that is interested in a public comment? Anyone on the phone line, not people on video? Anyone else on the phone? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to ask folks who are on video to actually type into the chat that you're interested in doing a public comment. If you're on something like an iPad, like me, and you don't have the ability to add something in the chat, just wait and I will call on folks at the end. We won't ignore you. Everyone's going to have an opportunity to speak if they would like to. Member Johnson, do we have anyone in the chat looking to speak?
We did earlier, but I don't.
I did think I saw Garrett, who has spoken at
Yes.
meetings before, and I see him here and he is nodding his head. Garrett O'Brien, please go ahead and you're welcome to 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Just checking. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I'm Garrett O'Brien. I live at 72 High Street in Greenfield. I'm an RBT at GHS, and I'm the newly elected membership co-chair of the GEA, the local union in Greenfield. I'll be brief. And first, I just want to thank Superintendent Harper and the school committee for the work they've already done and considerations that they've already made, as well as the inevitable work that will need to be done as we endeavor to provide quality education to all students during these unprecedented times in society. That said, we will need as much quality staff as possible to do so. The staff best suited for this work is the staff that already knows the children we serve in Greenfield. Therefore, we need to rehire all employees that were furloughed, riffed, or otherwise terminated due to COVID-related budgetary considerations. I want to urge the school committee to recommend that the city uses any monies received for education to be used by the school committee to rehire previously mentioned staff, retain all other staff, and to ensure the safety of all students and staff alike when considering a COVID education. Thank you for your time.
Garrett. Anyone else in the chat, Member Johnson?
Yes, Garth Brody.
Garth Brody, are you on the line? Ready to speak?
Hi.
Hello,
Yes.
go ahead. You have 3 minutes. And please tell us where you live.
I'm Garth Brody. I live in Turners Falls, but I work at GHS as a paraprofessional. And I'm also just going to be very brief. I would like to echo Garrett's comments and just echo the recently released MTA demand that school be started remotely before we transition to any kind of in-person plan. I think that's the only safe way to do it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else, Member Johnson?
Let's see, scrolling back through, Kaylee said I was hoping to hear the 3 proposals prior to providing public comment.
Well, what I would say in the most kindest and gentlest way is when you are on school committee, you may choose the order of the agenda.
Okay.
We do the best we can, people. Best we
Natalie
can.
would-
There is another school committee meeting scheduled for next Tuesday night, August 4th, with a 6:30 start, and we will do public comment then as well.
Kaylee, would you like to speak, knowing that you won't have the opportunity to speak after the proposals are heard? Not hearing any response. Looks like Grace. Grace Vecchio.
I'm sorry, Glenn, may I interrupt? I have Iome Caben. I'm sorry if I'm mangling people's names. Deborah Richards.
Oh, I see. I didn't scroll back far enough. Okay.
Natalie Feliciano, Grace Del Vecchio. I started making a list because I knew I'd stop seeing people.
Oh, it was Kelly Pereira that, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. It was Kelly Pereira. I just saw her chat. She doesn't want to speak tonight, I believe is what I saw, but I can't look at the chat again on my iPad. Sorry. I interrupted you, Member Ekstrom.
So anyway, I'm sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
Well, Member Ekstrom, if you have been keeping a list and you want to go ahead and call the order of speakers, that's fine with me.
Okay. People, again, if I'm mangling your name, my apologies. Iome Caben.
It is Iome Capan. I am a Greenfield resident and I have 2 children at the Discovery School. I guess I just want to say that my vote would be in favor of a remote start or a hybrid. Having kids at the school, I see that we don't have the budget, we don't have the desks, we certainly don't have the space to house the children in the school currently. And I know I said the budget statement, but I just want to reiterate that because we did have budget cuts. And in order to, I feel, comply with this in the safest way, we just don't have enough staffing. So that's my vote. And I'd love to come back next week after you've had a chance to discuss this some more and talk again then. So that's it.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Next on my list, I have Deborah Richards.
Hello, everyone. I just have a question, and this may be addressed. I'm sorry. Let me start over. Deborah Richards, 431 Green River Road, Greenfield.
What town you live in is fine. We don't need people coming to your house.
Great.
Yeah. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
This may be covered when we're going over the proposals will be going over, but I'm curious to hear what the school has been doing or if they have been looking at ventilation systems in the school if the students are coming back. I just kind of want to hear about that piece. And I also just, since I'm on, I just wanted to thank everyone for the work that you're putting into this. I know that it's difficult and hard, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Question absolutely will be addressed. We've been working very hard on that. Next one you got there, Member Ekstrom?
We spoke with Garth already. Natalie Feliciano.
Hi, my name is.
What town do you live in?
What town? I live in Greenfield. I have a son that goes to the Discovery School, Four Corners, and I'm on the school council there. I just wanted to make a comment that the sheer volume of money it's going to take to upgrade each and every school to become safe is going to be astronomical, and even renting tents to be put outside to shade our children is going to be astronomical. I'm wholly in favor of remote learning. I'm wholly in favor of doing everything we can to protect people, but I also understand that we have a very vulnerable population here in Greenfield, and there are students with special needs that do need in-person instruction. There are parents here, the children of single parent families or parents who both have to work full time and are not going to know what to do with their children. I think that the school committee really needs to think about how to support the families that are not lucky. Like I can keep my child remote, but there are families that cannot, and I'm hoping to really give a lot of thought on how to help others, and how to offer resources to help those in need, whether it be, opening up one school and doing all the upgrades for that one location to make sure you funnel in the students who need that in-person learning or the students who need the care and keep everyone possible at home. I just want to encourage the committee to think outside the box, to think about the vulnerable populations, and for everyone to know, as you all do, COVID is on the rise again in Massachusetts. We're going to be remote at some point, whether it's right away or it's a month from when school starts. It's a guarantee. And so sinking a ton of money into doing upgrades in all the schools with HVAC systems, air circulation, HEPA filters, hiring more IAs, and then saying, oh, okay, we're all going to go remote anyway. We have to think wisely about usage of money as well. That's all I want to say. I know this is complicated, so complicated. And I know you're going to do your best. That's it.
Thank you, Natalie. Next on my list is Grace Del Vecchio. Grace?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey. I live in East Hampton, and I'm a teacher in the life program at Greenfield High School. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's put in so much hard work to try to develop these 3 learning plans. And since I teach some of the children who have some of the most significant needs in our school, I do want to say that I'm a little frightened of in-person learning at this time, both because of the rise that we're seeing in the number of cases in the state, and also because I know my students, and a lot of them are much more vulnerable to making mistakes. It happens. And I hope that when people are thinking about moving forward, I understand that the state recognizes that these students have the need to have as much in-person instruction as possible. But I hope that we can go slowly in a really gradual way. And if we're going to bring children back into the building, we do it with safety as the most important element. And I know that you all want that. And nobody wants to have a child become ill or even have a teacher become ill. But I understand it's a lot to weigh. But I hope that everybody errs on the side of caution. And again, thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you, Grace. Julie Erickson?
Thank you. I teach. Oh, right. I live in Hatfield. I teach at Greenfield Middle School. I'm the 6th grade special education teacher, or well, technically I was. I'm currently one of the people who's sort of laid off, waiting to hear if I'll be rehired or not. I grew up in Coleraine, so Greenfield is home to me and my community, and I'm really committed to the middle school, and I've been very involved with planning and thinking about this and doing professional development all summer. Really hoping that I'll get my job back. I want to echo what some other folks have said. I really feel this tension between a lot of vulnerable students in our population who school is actually the safest place for them, even in the midst of a pandemic. And as a special ed teacher, those are some of the students that I work with, and I saw how hard it was for them in the spring and how hard it was on their families. And so I really think about them, and I think about myself personally not being in an at-risk population and eager to get back to being with students in person because it's such a rich way of learning. And at the same time, I know that if we are in person, there are so many things about our system that will actually hurt those that are more at risk, and that absolutely nobody should be forced to go back into the school, students or staff, if it doesn't feel safe. And I think we're far away from that, and the things that would be necessary to make the building safe are tremendous. So I'm moving towards supporting starting fully remote, but with putting a lot of careful thought into how to support the most vulnerable populations. The other thing I wanted to say is that I really, and this is part of why I've been so committed to thinking about this all summer, even not knowing if I'll have a job, is that I see this pandemic as a tremendous opportunity and potential for really positive change to an educational system that needs changes in many ways. And I just see, obviously, it's not going to be a normal school year in any way. The status quo is moot. And I just see so much potential for us to really rethink how we do things, both remotely and in person, whatever way we land. So I just want to echo people who are thinking outside the box, who are thinking about learning outdoors, who are thinking about letting go of MCAS, who are thinking about ways to really empower students, ways to center students of color and other vulnerable students. All of that's really important. I'm guessing there's whispering about my time. The last thing I want to say is I think the beginning of this meeting was with total respect to everyone, and I know how hard technology is, but I think telling on how much needs to be invested in developing people's skills to use technology. I've been in classes on Zoom professional development all summer that are totally innovative and interactive. I was in a workshop with 1,000 participants that was successful, and I really think the district needs to think about building capacity to use technology successfully. The beginning of this meeting was painful, knowing that it could be done better. And I know we're all learning, and I say that with total respect. And yeah.
Thank you, Julie. I'm sure that we all agree with you technology-wise. We can all use some assistance and certainly some improvements. Mary Kate Smith-Dupre?
Hi, my name is Mary Kate. I'm a Greenfield resident. I'm also a Greenfield parent. My child goes to Newton School. I'm also a special education teacher in the Gil Montague district. Like some other special ed teachers have said, I am especially concerned too. I'm not the parent of a child with special needs, and I understand that being a parent of a child with special needs is much different than being a teacher of a child with special needs. And I recognize how hard it was for my students to engage in remote learning in the spring. However, I've been reading all of DESE's guidance, both on special ed and on general ed, very closely. And while DESE says that students in programs like mine, sub-separate programs that are especially those high needs kids, quote, should be prioritized for receiving in-person instruction during the school year, end quote. This in-person instruction cannot happen at the expense of our special educators and our para-educators. If it is deemed that schools have not met the health and safety requirements that the MTA has made quite a wonderful list of, that folks in any other profession and buildings that are not old, decrepit public school buildings have an easier time meeting. If we've said that like those expectations cannot be met for our general education students, teachers, and staff to return the building, then we cannot expect our special education students, teachers, and staff to return under those conditions, especially given the fact that there's a much higher risk of transmission, any kind of virus or sickness, between our kiddos and us, given multiple adults are often in the room to support those kids. Some students, due to their disability, might have an inability to wear PPE or wear it properly. Some need help and high-level care, including hands-on assistance with toileting, feeding, and the kids who aren't in those resource skills programs still often need a high level of care with hands-on helping them to maintain safety or to access academic materials. further, even if we were to be able to come back to school, I worry about these kids sometimes the most. These are my students often have trauma backgrounds, and I can only imagine having to stay 6 feet apart from them and teaching from a place of fear that if I get closer and I'm now not thinking of my kid and my student in front of me as my kid and my student, but instead as someone who can make me and my family sick, that is not a place I want to teach from. And that's not a place I want other teachers to be put in the position to teach from. I also want to thank folks, as others did, about thinking outside the box and ideas about meeting in person outside. I think that could potentially be maybe an option if it was really carefully looked at. But we do need to make. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. And next I have Michael Sustik.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here and for all the people that have commented. I just want to say a couple quick things. One, if we do decide that, oh, sorry, I live in Northampton. I'm a teacher at the Four Corners School.
Thank you.
I teach kindergarten.
Go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to say, if we are going remote, and it seems like at least part of the beginning of the year, no matter how we dice it, is going to be remote, that there has to be some built-in flexibility. There's a lot of teachers and obviously families that have young children, or maybe kids that don't have another place to be right now. Daycares are closing, cutting hours, becoming inaccessible. So I would preach some flexibility for online learning. So it's not necessarily, okay, 8 to 10 here on your computer doing online learning, but make it work for the teachers and the families, because people have different work schedules and life schedules. So to make sure you put in the time, but not make it so rigid that it has to be a certain time. I would hope that, as so many people have said before, that at the very least we can do some sort of a meet and greet. I cannot imagine a year. I can't imagine a year teaching kindergarten remote. It's a nightmare. It's terrible to think about. But at the very, very least, base minimum, I need to meet these children, see them live in person, meet their parents. If I just see, their head on a computer screen for 170 days or 180 days or whatever it's going to be, it'll nothing effective will happen. And finally, I'd like to say that I think it's all of our responsibilities to realize that these are unprecedented times. No matter how we look at this, the school year is not going to be school as we know it. And I think one of the things that we really need to consider is how to cancel MCAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sustik. I can't call you Mike, sorry. Who's next? Member Ekstrom or Member Johnson? And it looks like Member Ekstrom, you're on mute.
So we have a person who has sent an email that has, because they weren't able to get into the meeting. And Katie has said that she would like to read that. Are we okay with that?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, Katie, go ahead.
Give me a second to unmute here. All right, hold on. She said she tried time and time again, and I know that I tried time and time again to get in myself. So I just feel like it's the right thing to do to read it. It says, my name is Sarah Chase, and tonight I'm speaking to you as an educator for 17 years in the public school system here in Mass. As a human being, a daughter, wife, friend, but primarily a mother. A very concerned mother of 2 vibrant young children, one of which has a history of respiratory issues. I strongly support a remote model for the return to school in the fall, or as the MTA refers to it, as we all should, COVID learning. We're not safe right now. The virus is not gone. We do not have a vaccine. Cases are rising in mass without our school buildings opening. I say buildings and not school because school can continue. Teachers can still teach, not how they want to or how parents want to, but they can. If the buildings open, these buildings that are old and are part of the school systems that have been underfunded for decades, the spike will be huge. Will we just end up back out of the building? At what cost does this come? Teachers' lives, their families' lives, children's lives, my children's lives? This virus lingers in the air for up to 3 hours. You can contract it from being in an enclosed space with someone for more than 10 minutes. It is a new virus we learn about every day, and that in of itself is very dangerous. What good would a hybrid model do to protect students from this virus inside an old, not well ventilated, not up to CDC COVID criteria based on school districts being severely underfunded? This virus kills people of all. Our schools do not meet the criteria and guidance to open. There is a safe alternative, though, and we have to take it. That alternative is remote learning. A hybrid plan, in my opinion, is also not feasible for families. How will they manage the logistics of a hybrid model with work and childcare, and then the possibility of closures because there will be cases? Wouldn't it be better to go into a year knowing we are in remote or COVID learning and then see where we are for cases in the winter, as opposed to a part-time model where we can close at any time? I know as a parent, the logistics are mind-blowing for me as they would be for many other parents. Based on all this and the problems in other countries, states, and cities as schools reopen that are happening right now, I implore you to support a remote or COVID learning model for the beginning of this year, and as long as it takes to make the building safe as the CDC recommends. We cannot jeopardize the lives of teachers, school staff in general, children and their families in this way. We have an alternative. We have to be reasonable, responsible, and good people and take it. That is the right thing to do in these times. Thank you for your time.
Can you repeat the name of that person for me, please?
It was Sarah Chase.
And any idea what town?
I'm assuming Greenfield, but that, you know what we all say about assuming.
That's fine. That's fine.
She might email us back with an answer if she's listening.
Okay. And Member Johnson or Member Ekstrom, more people on the list?
I have Ashley Nguyen next.
Ashley, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ashley Nguyen. I'm a Leverett, Mass resident, but I'm a teacher at Greenfield Middle School and a very proud Greenfield alumna. So I'm here to really just echo what I mean. That email from a parent was just beautiful and said it better than I could. But also want to fully support remote learning and just. And to just reassure all of our parents out there that remote learning can look very different than what it did in the spring. We were not given really any notice. School shut down right away, and we all just, did the very best we can. And I think Greenfield as a community did, really well under those very difficult circumstances. And I think that if we make that call to go remote, we'll have so many more opportunities. I think that the like the state government will, see how many other schools, including ours, are going to could choose remote learning and hopefully give more resources, more funding to support families and to support all of us in this endeavor. So that's, I guess I just wanted to echo that and say thank you. And also thank you to the great team for all their time on those just really in-depth different plans. So you could really see how much time and effort was put into there. And I just wanted to thank them for all of that. And I think that's about it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there anyone else? That's all I have on my list. Unless I've missed someone, please do speak up.
Great. So anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I want to acknowledge
there's
that
someone in the chat. Chair, there's somebody in the chat, Jamie, saying that this person would like to join in.
Yeah, I just saw that as well.
Can you hear me? Jamie, go ahead. Give us your full name and your town that you live in, and then you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Jamie Bartak. I live in Greenfield. I just have a little bit of a different perspective. I'm an essential worker, and at first our offices all went remote, like most other people, but we've actually been called back, and I'm sitting in my office right now. We have spacing, and everyone wears masks, and so far, so good. I know there's nowhere we're ever going to be where there's 100% no risk of anything. And I know it's a riskier time than normal, believe me, but masks work. And I think that there should be some sort of hybrid or in-person teaching available for students, because that is so important, particularly for the lower grades. I only have one daughter. She isn't around any other kids, and she's getting weird. So we need, the school development is very important. And I can say from experience that, masks work. My sister is a police officer. She's out there every day. She has been throughout all of this. There's masks, and masks work. I just got back. I was just on a plane and in a crowded airport, and I was wearing an N95. And I just got my COVID test back, and it's negative. Masks work. I'm not saying it's completely 100%, but I think with adequate spacing and with the proper PPE, as they have been doing in other countries that have the lower transmission rates that New England is experiencing, I think that we should try to have in-person or hybrid as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Any last calls for public comment?
Casey Erickson and Fern Smith after.
Hi, this is Casey. I'm a Greenfield resident. I have 2 children that will be at the middle school in the fall. I would like to say that I would support a hybrid model as well. I'm also a social worker, and I'm going to echo what Jamie said, that our kids' mental health is suffering, not having kids around and not having that one-on-one experience that they have had. And I don't want to make decisions for complete remote learning out of fear, because I think that as much as their physical health may be at risk, their mental health is also at risk, and we can't discount that. And also has more long-lasting implications, in my opinion. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Fern Smith.
Hi, my name's Fern Smith, live in Greenfield, and I have 2 kids that go to Federal Street School. And this is a hard one for me. I am in favor of remote or hybrid learning, though both my husband and I are both essential workers and will have no childcare. So I'm wondering if there is an option. The very first speaker spoke about maybe trying to figure out if there are some classrooms that maybe could be in class and then have some other teachers be remote. And I don't know if that's possible. It seems a logistical nightmare. So I thank you all for all the work. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Fern. Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none, we are going to move on to the rest of the meeting. I want to interrupt for Jordana. It looks like, oh, never mind. I saw an email from Andy, but it looks like he can't get in. Andy,
Chair-
yeah. From
Chair
PMS.
Prietti, comment from school committee member?
No, we're going to move into the agenda. There's no comments after public comment. That is absolutely unprecedented. We're going to move on to the agenda.
Could
So,
you
go ahead. What was that?
Could you please acknowledge all the parents who wrote in? Just thank them.
Yes, we've had a ton of communication from parents and from community members and from teachers, and it's obvious that people care a great deal about this issue and how we go about making the decision and what the plans are, and we certainly appreciate all of that. That is absolutely appreciated. I've never seen people have so much interest in a school committee meeting. And it's with good reason. We're in a pandemic. Okay, so our business items for tonight, all reopening plans. And I believe there's a presentation attached to this.
So I'll begin this. I don't know if
Lauren and I tested. Do you want the slides up now?
I do. Lauren, are you presenting, or do you want me to go ahead and present?
I believe she's ready to present so that you can just do the talking.
All right, so we'll see if you can see this presentation. Thanks. I want to start by thanking everybody that joined in. I think you can go right live, Lauren, from the Google Doc. Okay, or you can go from there. Perfect. So thank you to everybody that joined in, and there are many members of this committee that will be presenting throughout, so please bear with us as we present remotely, and it represents a real team effort. So I want to thank everybody that was on this. And we are going to try to present a lot of information as clearly and concisely as possible, with the goal of taking questions if there are questions at the end. And I do want to encourage everyone listening. This is an overview that we're presenting, but we did put a lot of detail into the documents. They are publicly available. They are on the GPS K-12 website. That link was sent out in advance. It's available now as you're watching. And we are making an effort to provide translation. I do believe that closed captioning is available if you want to listen to this presentation with Spanish language captions on. That's also available. So we are making an effort to make this information as accessible as possible. And Lauren, next slide, please. Katie's up.
Good evening. I am going to talk to you about the first couple of these slides. You know, I really just want to reiterate how awesome it was to work on this team. There were, I mean, the list is here. I want to say about 20 to 30 of us working a lot of hours to really try to do this as objectively as possible. Try and really follow the guidelines, figure out what was feasible, what we needed to do to make it feasible. It wasn't necessarily at the beginning a process of ruling out. It was a process of ruling in, of deciding what things we could do, what things we needed to do, and how we could make them happen, and the implications of that financially, and all of that. So with all that wonderful stuff said about my team, I was really grateful to work with a lot of really concerned and wonderfully intelligent people in our community. The goals of our great committee were: number one priority is the health and safety of our students, families, staff, and community members. It really is about our entire community. The AAP and DESE guidance said to return as many students as school to possible. So that was always in the back of our head. We conducted a really objective feasibility logistical study according to the guidelines, including a review of the facilities, the staffing, the PPE, the technology, the learning outcomes, high needs learners, equity, and access to the things we were providing, all right from the beginning. It was always on the forefront of our minds. We met in whole groups, subcommittees, then we had these subcommittees, and we broke out into school-based subcommittees, and we broke out into 3 of the model group subcommittees. And really everybody was constantly communicating with each other about their findings. And it was a really wonderfully difficult thing to work on, but wonderfully experienced. We acknowledge the reality that everybody has strong opinions on all sides of this, and that many of our staff, not just our teachers, but our custodians, our nurses, our administrators, our administrative assistants, our paraprofessionals, they're not just teachers or educators, they are parents. And it goes both ways. A lot of our parents are also teachers, different districts, our own district. And it was really important to keep all of that in mind. We can switch to the next slide, Lauren, if you'd like. The purpose of our great committee is to form a diverse working group of parents, educators, health officials, school committee members, community members, and administrators to explore all the opening scenarios. This is one of the most common questions I got: who is on this committee? And here it is. I'm not thinking I need to read all of these names, but they are all there, and they all worked extremely hard to get this from all angles. We wanted to create additional forums and gather as much information as we could. So surveys, feedback, and email. We created our own specific great team email so we could get information from people and we could all see it. We considered and represented a range of perspectives and opinions, and hundreds of hours of volunteer time went into creating these 3 plans. This was a lot of work, and I really hate the phrase labor of love, but it was, because we all really, really care about our community and really want to make sure we're doing best by every person in it. I think that's all for me.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Okay, perfect. Sorry. I'm calling. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kia Burton King. I am a parent of a entering 4th grader and 7th grader, a parent representative. I am a school liaison at Community Action Family Center, Greenfield High School alum, GCC alum. And I have the privilege of being on the great team and presenting to you the timeline for reopening Massachusetts schools. As you could, if you're watching, June 25th is when DESE, and for those, I know acronyms are confusing, so DESE stands for Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. DESE released on June 25th the initial fall reopening guidance. Our very first great team meeting was June 26th, the very next day. And I know if you're looking at the chart, you may say, well, oh, there's only 2 green dots. But I just want to say that the great team met as a whole group weekly, and then in subgroups almost twice a week. There are several different groups and working groups, so site-specific, so meaning like different school buildings, age, and even model-specific meetings. Altogether, we had about 700 plus hours of meeting, and then 100 plus hours in subgroups. And we still are receiving emails. We're still ready and preparing to continue meeting. I also, so yes, back to the timeline. On July 10th, DESE released additional guidance for fall reopening plans. Then again, on the 15th, released directed schools to complete the feasibility studies, which what GREAT is doing, and released the template for 3 reopening plans. Then a couple days later, July 17th, DESE released protocols for responding to COVID scenarios. Again, several days later, on July 22nd, DESE released transportation and facilities models, guidance, I should say. And then here we are today, July 30th, presenting to you all our presentation of the feasibility study of the 3 models to you, the school committee, and the public. Tomorrow, the initial proposals and feasibility studies of all 3 models will be due to DESE. And then August 10th, a comprehensive plan of documents are due to DESE. If you look at the bottom, there's links to all the documents, and it's a lot of reading. I want to pat us on the back and also encourage anyone to click some of those documents. It's very informative. And from the parent perspective, I just want to say, when I think about how to articulate the great team and, working with guidelines being released every other day, it's kind of like going back to school shopping. You need to do it. You can't get started and get a few things, the same old things, but it's like, you need pencils, but what type of pencils? You need notebooks, but how many notebooks and what type of notebooks? So that's kind of like what we were dealing with when we were looking at the guidelines. We knew that we needed different models, but what were the guidelines? And so, yeah, thank you for allowing me to share the timeline for a reopening of Massachusetts schools. Next slide.
So Alan Schmidt, our facilities director, was planning to join us. He had some difficulty logging in, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been done and are in progress. I've heard a criticism from the public sometimes, like, why are you waiting for all this guidance from DESE? Why aren't you just getting out in front of it? And so I want you to understand that we are doing everything in our power because we want to be back in school with students. So what we're doing is absolutely everything that we can be doing at the same time that the guidance comes out much later than you might like it, and it's extremely challenging to balance. An example is early on, it wasn't clear whether or not face shields would be recommended as opposed to masks. And there was a consideration about whether to buy additional face shields. Had we done that early on, we would have been out the money for buying face shields except where medically necessary or appropriate for students that cannot see, that need to see your mouth, such as students that are hard of hearing or deaf. So that's an example of how it's difficult to balance what it is that we need to do, often with long lag time. I don't know if many of you have ordered anything during this situation, but some companies and some industries are really disrupted. And so shipping time is very long. Things like Chromebooks take a long time. And Chromebooks that we ordered in February and March have come in, which is good. But we had to get going long before we could expect things here. So not typical conditions. So these are some of the things that we've done. And we're doing this knowing that we don't yet know which scenario the school committee will select. And we don't know what the public health information will look like, although community transmission rates right now are very low in our area. So some things that we've done, we have purchased personal protective equipment, mask, gloves, plexiglass for visitor areas to schools, protect our administrative assistants and public areas. We coordinated with the FERCOG to get good bulk pricing on equipment that was sometimes in scarce supply. We've purchased additional Chromebooks, and the technology department has been hard at work repairing Chromebooks that were lent out and had any kind of damage, purchasing additional materials like cases and protective equipment, and really getting ready to make sure that if a lot of students want or ask to go remote, that we have Chromebooks available. We've begun the preparation of outdoor spaces. And I think some people in their comments said, you know, you could be thinking outside the box, you could be using outdoor instruction. An example is that we will have large outdoor tents at every school, sort of industrial size 40 by 40 foot tents. That will be additional space that will provide some protection for students in any of our scenarios to improve ventilation. We know that the risk of COVID transmission can be as much as 20 times less in outdoor spaces, so we have invested in that. We've looked at how to expand our space. So we've looked at all possible additional space. Green River School, working with the rec department, looking at available space like the parks, and even looking at out-of-the-box ideas like how could we use Green River Pavilion if we needed to under the different models. We surveyed families and staff. I want to stress to you that sharing the comments in the staff and family survey was very important, because for every comment that said we absolutely must go in person, somebody said we absolutely must go remote. Some people said if you do anything, just don't go back in person, and other people said if you do anything, just don't go back remote. I will say that this is a situation in which there is no solution that will please everyone. We're not aiming to please everyone. We're aiming to do the best we can for our students, to keep them safe, and to keep at the forefront of our mind that this is a very challenging time for all families who have really been called upon to step up, and all teachers who reported across the board that they have worked harder than ever despite feeling more frustrated than ever and unable to help their students. We removed some of the personal furniture from classrooms to make as much room as possible. Close collaboration with central maintenance and other folks on the city side to evaluate the HVAC systems to improve ventilation. And we've spent a lot of time evaluating and working on improving our remote learning platforms. I want to caution people that sometimes people think, oh, great, now they're just going to get rid of what they did before and jump to something new, and then we'll have all new problems. What we're trying to do is keep what worked well. We've got a lot of positive feedback about adding Google Meet towards the end of the spring. We know that that worked well, although we would have liked it to be available to families and students much sooner. So we'd like to build on what worked and then add additional tools to make it easier for families, for students to be more independent, and for teachers to be able to focus on feedback and consistency across the district. We heard that loud and clear. We really learned a lot from the feedback, so it's very important that we heard from you all. And as you heard earlier tonight, a lot of teachers, including those that have been laid off, have been participating in professional development. Next slide, please. This is to Mike Kaczewski.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Kaczewski. I'm the athletic director at Greenfield Public Schools, a teacher and a coach, and also a parent of 2 high school students. And I'm going to talk about the survey data that the parents and staff did in early in the summer. I'm going to talk about the top square where it says, how comfortable would you be sending your children back to in-person if possible, based on the DESE guidelines. As you can see, 19.6% of our families felt very comfortable with their children returning to school, and 23.4% felt very uncomfortable with their children to school. As you see in the colored pie chart, there are other percentages on there, and it leans more towards a somewhat and all uncomfortable. On the bottom one, it says for the staff, it's how confident are you about your students safely return to school under the conditions described in the DESE. And 17.4% of our teachers felt very confident about the students, and 39.4% felt not at all about their student safety. This full survey data was sent out previously. So this is not new. So most of our staff got all of this. Next slide, please. So this slide is what would you want for this fall? And again, we had 530 responses, and the families basically had a little bit different perspective in the beginning of the summer. 46% of them wanted in person, 31% wanted hybrid, and 23% wanted a remote. Again, this was done in the beginning of the summer. There was a lot of comments that are on there that probably way too many to be able to read all of them here. We would be here probably till tomorrow morning. But this basically tells what we felt as a community in the beginning of the summer. Thank you, and good luck, school committee.
Good evening. My name is Melody Goodwin. I am the principal of Newton School. And it's my pleasure to talk to you tonight about the work of the great team. We are presenting 3 models. And the slide in front of you is called Adapting to Change during COVID-19. That is a daily challenge that all of us face, from how to get to the dentist to how to open a school. So one of the things that is definitely going to happen is it doesn't matter what model we choose or what the school committee chooses, things are going to be different. Every day we get new guidelines from the state. So even our guidelines that we were presented prior to today may change tomorrow, and we may have to adapt. So what that might look like, we encourage all families to monitor their children's health daily, take temperatures, ask your children how they're feeling, monitor the health every day before coming to school. If we, with each model, we would ask that that happen. Social distancing in our schools looks very different, 6 feet or 3 feet. It still will feel very different. All of the routines we have taught your children since they came to school will change. When they go to the bathroom, how they go to the nurse, everything, how they're going to eat lunch, all those routines are going to change. So each model has those changes built into them. So we want you to know that in-person schooling, hybrid model, remote model, everything is in a state of change. So, but the most important thing is to monitor the health of your family. And so as we move forward, we want to say to you, we know that this change is real. All of the hours all of us have spent reading different people's opinions, guidelines from the state, scientists, teachers, all of the things that we have read. There is constant change in the information being presented to educators throughout the United States. So one of the things we want you to understand is that we're all having to change, and each model represents change, and those models may even change tomorrow with new guidelines. Our state has presented guidelines to us. We have followed those guidelines to come up with creative solutions, and we welcome the fact that you are being presented tonight with many of those creative solutions.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Pam Owen. I'm the lead school nurse for Greenfield. I'm part of a fabulous team of school nurses that serve our children. I'm a parent of a Greenfield high school student, and I'm a Greenfield resident. Let's briefly describe here the basic safety measures we plan to put in place for school reopening, and that's in all models. Hand washing is a cornerstone to prevent COVID transmission and will be incorporated into students' routines several times per day. Wearing masks will be standard safety attire for students, with requests of parents to provide cloth masks for their children and to begin practicing mask wearing regularly before school begins. Staff, too, will be wearing masks consistently to make the practice a universal one for our schools. Physical distancing will be a constant element of school life, as Principal Goodwin has begun to mention. We plan medical waiting rooms in each school to isolate those students with symptoms while waiting for parent pickup. Daily and deep cleaning protocols have been developed to assure disinfected surfaces, especially frequent use touch points. Some students will be enlisted in helping with sanitizing their desks before and after meals. And also, as has already been mentioned, we ask for all of our families' involvement in keeping our students safe and our staff and our community safe, in monitoring their children's health daily, and just keeping an eye out for anything different in their health and well-being. We're here to reach out to answer any questions possible, and please just have the lowest threshold for keeping yourself safe at home if not feeling well. Thank you.
Next, I will, again, this is a slide that Alan Schmidt was going to talk about, talking a little bit about the analysis that has been done of the physical capacity. I think you've already heard, and you may be aware, that physical space in the Department of Education guidance is 3 feet or more. So one of the steps that was taken was to use the tool board. There's a parametric dashboard that was developed, and some much more low-tech ways of doing this. One teacher graphed their classroom and put pennies on it to represent desks and move them about, to actually measure every single classroom, how many desks will fit, and to actually look at the specific types of desks, for example. I need to thank our custodians who, when we initially closed schools, we thought we were going to be coming back in a couple of weeks. And so our custodians didn't hesitate to jump in and begin deep cleaning all of our schools and buildings. And they've kept everything going. They've shifted into preparation for the fall. School walkthroughs have been conducted at each school to identify things as commonplace as which bathroom stalls are too close together to be appropriately used. How do we reduce traffic flow? Which hallways need to be one way? How will we label things? Of course, we've talked about the desks, but it's much more. It includes access to lockers, water coolers, and so on. And so those important site-based walkthroughs helped us identify what in our physical environment lends itself to each of the models, and how can we modify the environment to make it safe for students to return. I'd like to thank George Vandelinder on the city central maintenance and Alan Schmidt for their work on the heating and cooling system. And we received an estimate from the Energy Department earlier today. The Energy Office estimated that with the changes that we had planned, that we would see a 30 to 50% increase in energy consumption due to increased ventilation and need for heating and cooling, because we're doing things like bringing in additional airflow, changing filters more frequently, planning to change them again at the next break, and really increasing ventilation wherever possible, including installation of fans, but being mindful even to the detail of not pointing fans in because they can actually spread illness, but pointing them out. And again, working with all of these through numerous sets of guidelines, CDC guidelines, AAP guidelines, DESE guidelines, and facilities guidelines, and with experts that can really guide us on this work. Next slide.
Hi, Karen Patnode, principal of Greenfield High School. As part of the Great Teams mission, all schools had to do a facilities review to determine available classroom spacing under 6 foot and 3 foot social distancing guidelines. What you see on this slide is a sample GHS classroom with 3 foot social distancing guidelines and 6 foot social distancing guidelines. It's important to note that a space is needed for exits so that students can exit a room safely. And in a hybrid model alone at the high school, at least 56% of our classes would have to be at the 3 foot social distancing guideline in order to accommodate our numbers. And this was just to give you a visual of what that would look like. Next slide, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Good. My name is Tara Cloutier. I am a teacher at Greenfield High School. I'm also a Greenfield resident and a parent of 2 high school students. And I'm also the vice president of the Greenfield Education Association. I'm here to talk about some considerations that would be present in either a hybrid or an in-person return. The first being transportation. Transportation has caused quite a number of issues. If we are limited to 25 students on a 72 passenger bus, we cannot bring all the students that need to get there at the same time. So in order for this to happen, we would have to have enough parents commit to bringing their children to school, as we will not have the capacity for busing. There's some issues with staffing as well. We are still waiting for full numbers, but there are many staff that have underlying medical conditions that may prevent them from returning to teach in school in person. We could also have staff with childcare issues. For instance, if their children went to school in a different district and they were in a hybrid model and our school was in a fully in-person model or vice versa, there may be issues with childcare for our teachers. On the issue of substitute teachers, in a regular school year, we often don't have enough subs to cover the absence of teachers, and we anticipate this being an even greater issue during a COVID-19 return to school. Next slide, please.
Can you hear me? It's Janet Dickinson. I'm guessing yes. I'm Janet Dickinson. I'm the interim director of pupil services for the district. And in talking about a phased approach, we're referring to in person, whether it be for a hybrid model or for an in-person model. Now, in pupil services, we focus on the most vulnerable populations. And when we had the school closure in the spring, the pupil services office, all our special education teachers and staff members, our teachers of English language learners, worked very hard on providing services. Someone's saying it's hard to hear me. Can you hear me? Can most of you hear me?
It's hard to hear you.
Well, if I talk very loudly, can you hear me? Try turning off your video. Okay. Does this help? Can you hear me better? Okay. So in pupil services, we're talking about the most vulnerable populations of students. And as you can see on this slide, the state guidance has defined those populations. In Greenfield Public Schools, we prioritized several groups from that population from the very beginning of the school closure. For example, we provided live video instruction to students with disabilities, students who have IEPs, as early as possible. And that's something that the district is committing to continue doing. And so in light of that, the idea is that with phasing of services, we first bring in the most vulnerable student groups and the highest need student groups. And these are students who really cannot benefit from remote instruction and have great difficulty from it. So they would come in first, and then students, the larger student population would come in thereafter. So in this phasing approach, for example, if we were going towards all students coming into school, then, for example, in the first 2 weeks, we would have the highest need students, such as students who are in special education classrooms for most of their day, beginning level English language learners, and we use an assessment called WIDA to determine the English learning level of these students. So we're talking about levels 1 and 2, having those students come in. And you can see on this list other priority groups who would follow thereafter. So the most vulnerable students, those with the highest needs, would come in, for example, in the first 2 weeks. Get acclimated, start learning with appropriate approaches for them, how to use masks, using what we call social stories with some of those students, starting hand washing practices frequently, social distancing, and then in a few weeks, having the remainder of the student population come in. Also prioritized would be students who are transitioning to a different building, to a different grade. And not just a different grade, but a different building. So for example, students entering kindergarten, students entering 5th grade, and students entering 8th grade. Those are challenging times. Moving to another building with different expectations can be very challenging for students. In a normal time, when we don't have a pandemic, you're talking about acclimating to new rules, new structures, new teachers, larger groups of children and students. But here we're also talking about moving to other buildings, and during a time when we have these additional health considerations. The grade group felt that using a phased approach was particularly important going forward with whatever plan is developed that includes an in-person component. Next slide, please.
This is Eliza Calkins. Can you hear me okay? We can hear you, Eliza. Okay. Okay. Is that better? This is Eliza Calkins, the school food service director. And I just want to talk about school meals. I want to reassure families that school meals will be served under all of the models. Meals will be available to both in-person and remote learners under any model, no matter which model is chosen. And I just want to say thank you to the amazing Greenfield Public Schools food service team. We've served 138,996 meals since March 16th. And I think that's everything. Next slide.
So this slide describes some general terms, and we're going to talk about each of these, so we won't spend a lot of time. This is also in the report. The same language is used in several different places. We just want to make clear that when we talk about in-person learning, we're talking about bringing back all students that wish to come back, using at least 3-foot distancing, and providing for 4 days a week of schooling, Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, we would deep clean and allow time for teacher collaboration, materials, and student feedback. We would use the cohort model, except at the high school, it is clear that students cannot reliably form cohorts. Instead, they would follow a modified course schedule throughout the day because of the nature of high school courses. When we speak about a hybrid model, we're talking about a combination of in-person and remote learning. We will follow the 6-foot distancing guidelines wherever possible, because in a hybrid model, you have fewer people in the building at any one time, so you do have more space. However, even in a hybrid model, we do not have the ability to do all classrooms at 6 feet. We would always have a minimum of at least 3 feet of space in the hybrid model. The model that we propose for hybrid is 2 days a week of in-person learning on a cohort model and remote instruction the other 3 days. For example, Monday, Tuesday, in person for cohort 1, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, remote. Cohort 2 in reverse, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, remote, and Thursday, Friday, in person. We have also talked, if we selected this model and it went for a long period of time, if there were any lost days due to some students attending on a Monday, losing those instructional days, of switching the 2 cohorts after a period of time to ensure equity between these 2 groups. When we talk about learning, remote learning, I don't want anyone to picture exactly what happened in the spring. The guidance from DESE has been updated. So although it wouldn't be in person, it will not be the same as what happened this past spring. For example, it will be graded, daily attendance will be expected, and we are really emphasizing project-based assignments, live instruction, and extensive feedback. And finally, we're introducing a concept that we'd like to call Remote Plus. In a way, this is a bit of a combination. It is hybrid in the sense that it includes elements of in-person instruction, but it has the basis of remote instruction for all students with additional in-person services. And those students and services are prioritized according to their high need status, which could include students that do not have internet access, and as Dr. Dickinson explained, the prioritized list that we just talked about. In the Remote Plus model, depending on how many students we bring back in person in this model, we could potentially include weekly tutoring for students in small groups or pods. In addition, we may be able, with the available space in the school, to supervise remote learning sessions at 6-foot distances, or additional services that are in person. So those are what we're defining as these different scenarios, and we're going to talk more about each one, but I want you to have those terms in your mind as we continue.
Two of our elementary schools were short of space before the pandemic. And so our challenge was to figure out space and how to do it safely with an in-person model. Furniture was moved, things were measured, every principal today got a great gift of a tape measure that went longer than 6 feet. So we appreciate that, Mr. Schmidt, for getting us tape measures. So one of the things that is really clear is that our full in-person program requires using space differently. According to the Department of Ed guidelines, instead of when you run out of space, you're supposed to use large spaces like your gymnasium or your cafeteria or your library or your art room or your robotics room to house instructional classrooms. Those spaces are not set up for instructional classrooms. They don't have smart boards, and they also don't have furniture. Many of our schools were very proud of the fact that we have alternative furniture, furniture that we think is more appropriately for a child's well-being. That furniture is not as conducive to social distancing in a space. Our classrooms, a regular classroom, on average can hold 10 students at a 6-foot distancing, and on average at a 3 feet, about 16 students. Our class sizes vary from 22 to larger at the high school. So principals and the great teams started to think, where else can we put our children to be in person? So gymnasiums. One of the things that happened really fast was we ran out of furniture, or the furniture that is described by the state guidelines, which they should be ashamed of. But one of the things that also is really clear is that some of the guidelines contradict themselves. So if you're an elementary person and you have a classroom at 3 feet distancing, but you have to have lunch in your classroom to keep the cohort safe, the children must be 6 feet apart. So it's very hard to imagine a group of children, or what we call a cohort, 10 or 16 children in a classroom with a teacher. They have breakfast in the classroom. We're very proud to be part of breakfast in the classroom. We believe in all that it presents. And also stay in that classroom and then have lunch in their classroom. So when children are required to eat, they must remove their mask, and therefore 6 feet of distance is required. Everything from how to manage the bathroom trips. How many children can be in a hallway waiting to go to a bathroom? One full class does not fit in a Newton hallway at 6 feet of distancing. So space and staffing has been a problem with every guideline. Greenfield, we have suffered through budget cuts, painful budget cuts, and we cannot do any of these models without additional staffing. That is one of the biggest concerns. So you'll see that staffing is discussed throughout. So one of the things that you'll see with in full in person is the need for that extra cleaning, that deep cleaning. Our buildings are not new buildings. They're not easy to clean. Newton alone is 105 years old this year, and cleaning those buildings is something that has to happen. If we can have the next slide. So you can see the way the furniture is arranged with 3-foot distancing, cafeteria, gyms, libraries. And one of the things that is really noticeable is this is not the way our children have been learning in the past. Most classrooms have tables where we encourage kids to be cooperative and learn how to function as a team. I actually looked at this the first time I actually looked at it. I remembered those good old days where things flew through the air in classrooms as a teacher. We really have changed the way schools look. So these are what the guidelines are talking about. 6 feet of distance for the teacher to teach. Also 6 feet or 3 feet between a desk and the surrounding desks. There is we've talked about ways to do physical breaks like hula hooping and different things that can happen in this type of environment. But this is what it would actually look like. So for us to do full in person, one of the things that would need to happen is really looking at what parents have chosen remote learning, because that will impact the number of children for each building. Your elementary schools all have about 250 children, and we love our small neighborhood schools. It gives us a real feeling of family. It's something Greenfield has been proud of for years, and we still are. So we looked at everything. We looked at, what about Green River? What about the heating system at Green River? We looked at, can we build things on our playgrounds that to put small groups of children in. Transportation. The guideline for transportation assumes children actually sit in a seat. It assumes that the bus, everybody is quiet, everybody is masked. We know that's not true. So looking at how parents can provide transportation, whether we could use bicycles, whether we could use skateboards, all of the different considerations have been there. Reduction in force is it's just a phrase I don't even like. As an educator, I've gotten those slips, and it's a painful process. And one of the things we know is that even with reduction in force, with all the staff brought back, we are still going to need more staff. We've had a lot of retirements. Teachers are having to make their life choices, as well as parents making their life choices. So you can look at the additional positions. One of the additions is a nurse, a 0.5 nurse. We talk about medical assistants, and many parents won't know what that means, but it's about the fact that at a typical day, a nurse may see 60 young children in their office just for a little love, for a cough drop, for I scraped my knee, I need a Band-Aid. So instead of those 60 children wandering to their nurse, we're proposing that a medical assistant with a cart, having all of the necessary equipment on it, push into the classroom, be there. Adults will be pushing in. The adults will move, the children will not. So custodians, it's obvious, the cleaning is really necessary. Bus monitors, those are my heroes every day. Anybody who would like to watch a bus video knows that the guidelines really don't understand what happens on a bus. So it really is about staffing and space. And we miss our children. There's not one educator who is not missing the voices of the children of Greenfield. And next. So there are pros and there are cons to all of the models. We all prefer in person. We miss the smiles, we miss everything. I met with a kindergarten teacher today, and she's like, how do we do this? Because kindergarten is all about being social. So how do we do this? So looking at how can we best bring full in-person in place while also keeping everyone safe, children, staff, and families, extended families. So we know that every child learns best in person. We've had a few children who've just taken off with remote learning who seem to love that. But that in person, we all believe it should be something teaches skills that they need for life. It allows us to assess students constantly. It allows us to adjust what we're doing. It promotes positive relationships within a community. All the models have children being fed. Greenfield is very proud. We feed families in Greenfield. So breakfast and lunch. And also, one of the good things about the in-person model is it's still, families have the right to choose being remote. You should be asking yourself, What am I comfortable with? What do I feel comfortable with? No one wants anyone anxious or afraid. We do not want those feelings associated with school in any way. So we would like to make sure that people understand they have options. The cons, 600 people in one building. You know, we're all watching the news every day. The number of people in a building seems to impact social interaction. Telling children not to socially interact. Recess. That's, you know, not having recess. Recess outside at 10 feet apart. Not having rugs, not having alternative seating. Gyms as classrooms. They don't have smart boards. The ventilation, you know, you'd have to open a gym door, but that violates a safety rule. That, so all of these things, you know, pros and cons are here for you to see. But one of the things we want to make sure is with a full in-person model, is that families are monitoring, teachers are monitoring, everyone is monitoring their health to make sure that the model would be one where everyone is reporting health concerns.
Hi, good evening. My name is Eric Stone. Can you hear me? Right on. My name is Eric Stone. I am a teacher at Newton Elementary. I've been a teacher in Greenfield for 11 years, I think. And I'll talk a bit about the hybrid approach. This approach is going to be combining an in-person learning experience with a remote learning experience. In order to make this model work while adhering to social distancing guidelines, students will be separated into 2 cohorts, thereby reducing the number of students in our facilities by half. Cohort 1 will be in school Monday and Tuesday and be doing remote learning Wednesday through Friday. Cohort 2 will be in school Thursday and Friday with remote learning occurring Monday through Wednesday, Wednesday being a cleaning day. Some students who may require special instruction or more instruction will get that additional in-person instruction. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. There are some pictures that you see, again, of social distanced classrooms. A lot of teachers did some hard work moving furniture around, measuring, taking pictures, and trying to envision what it would look like. You've seen a number of pictures about how that would look. I would caution, being an elementary school teacher, that to get my room to look like those rooms would take an entire amount of work. So elementary school rooms tend to be a little different than what we've seen, barring a couple. But having said that, this is what it would look like, and you see a picture of a young lady doing a remote learning project. So that would be a combination of those 2 things. Next slide.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Dole, and I'm the principal at Greenfield Middle School. Throughout this presentation, we've made some reference to some of the tools that the state provided, and here you see a graphic representing the spacing tool that was provided to help us with, again, determining how many seats could be placed in each room. Next slide. As we look at the benefits and the challenges of the hybrid approach, I think that there's many things that we can see that are opportunities to strengthen the connections between the schools and at-home learning by having students be present with the teacher and all of the opportunities to interact with their peers every week on the cohort model. And as has been explained earlier, some students who may need additional support might be there for additional days beyond the 2 days of in school of the hybrid model. As noted, the remote only option is available to families. But when we think about the hybrid model, I see it having the benefits, but also the challenges of in-person learning and remote learning. So as we look at the challenges, there's all of the logistics that have been outlined in the beginning section about transporting students safely and assuring that when everyone is in school, safety can be the top priority. And the logistics of assuring that remote learning can be done effectively. A big benefit of the hybrid approach is that the remote learning that it's happening part of the week can be supplemented by the in-person contact of having students see the adults who are so important to their school life when they are in the school building. Next slide, please. And again, as a review, with the hybrid model, there's many of the logistical requirements that have been outlined previously for the in-person, and it presents opportunities and challenges as a hybrid approach. Next slide, please.
This is Karen Patnode again, and I'm going to go over Model 3, the remote learning / remote learning plus. And we want to be really clear that the remote learning model that's outlined here will look very different than it did in the spring. It'll be more rigorous, and per DESE guidelines, there are some important factors that we will be paying close attention to and working on. For one is daily attendance and tracking that daily attendance to ensure that all students are engaged in their learning. Grading, as opposed to the pass-fail option that we had in the spring, grades will be implemented in this model. Live instruction every day, the use of Google Meet or recorded video instruction, project-based assignments, and more engagement in ways for students to become more involved in their school community. It's such as we did a poetry slam at the high school in the spring, but really expanding on those social interactions, even if they are in a virtual presentation. The Remote Plus includes offering additional in-person tutoring groups, more services, possibly at locations for our high needs populations, maybe utilizing our outdoor area spaces for tutoring sessions, and accessing areas in person for students without access to internet. Next slide, please. As with all models, there are pros and cons. Some of the pros of the remote is that students and staff that are at high risk are able to stay better protected at home, improve upon the technology that we used in the spring. Teachers would be able to focus on content and delivery of instruction, not micromanaging, maybe wearing masks, telling kids to social distance, reiterating all of the guidelines that they have to adhere to. The schedule would be predictable. Students and staff would not have to wear masks, and our energies could be focused on teaching and learning instead of all those safety protocols. Some of the cons, obviously limited in-person engagement with teachers and peers, lack of Wi-Fi access for some, the increased screen time and the detriment of that, the lack of interest or harder to keep our students and families engaged, technology and remote platform costs if we want to expand upon what we're using, and the lack of childcare for our families with students at home. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Horton, and I'm a teacher at the Academy for Early Learning. I'm also a parent of a middle schooler. This slide here that you see depicts a very small view of what remote learning looked like for preschool. Our students were provided with monthly packets that were delivered by us that included art materials, literacy and books, math activities, model DIY boats, gardening supplies, and many other learning materials that went along with our thematic teaching. The platform that we used was live Google Meets, instructional videos, and Google Classroom. We even had an end of the year sing-along online with freeze pops that were delivered by our teachers, which was a lot of fun. All the teachers received regular pictures and feedback from our families, which made this really extremely difficult situation a little bit better. We were creative and provided hands-on materials for our students. Going forward, if we are in a remote model, we will take what we learned in the spring and build on that by utilizing Google Meet and more of a robust learning platforms that we are currently looking into. Having the use of live video from the beginning will also broaden our curriculum and our offerings. Thank you.
I think we're back to me here. So we have some next steps to take. The school committee needs to really approve all 3 of these plans so that we can send them on to the Department of Ed and the state tomorrow. We should maybe be aiming to select an initial preferred model so that, or just narrowing it down so that our educational team, our great team, and our educators can start moving forward. The great team is continuing to meet. We will finalize comprehensive plan documents, including resources, prioritizing the plan. School personnel will deploy resources towards whatever model we prioritize. Following this decision, additional surveys will be or may be necessary to determine if families' choices under the available options. And we are currently planning as a school committee to meet next Tuesday at 6:30. I think it's really important that we really understand that, yes, we've been working really hard on these plans, and yes, there's a lot of information here to unpack, and there are a lot of questions to be answered, and I'm excited to hear the committee's questions and start moving through that process. But the process is not over. It's a lot of hard work already in, but it's, I don't want to say just begun, but it is. This is an ongoing process that we will be continuing to work and meet on for the entire time that we are in a pandemic. This is not just a make a decision and never look back. This is make a decision, reevaluate, work together, work in our community, look out for each other, and make the best of what's going to happen next.
So I have a question.
Oh, member extra. So it looks like we've reached the end of the presentation. The great committee, amazing, very detailed, such group effort. That's super, super impressive. And yes, at this point, I think it makes sense to have some questions and discussion with the school committee members. Go ahead, member Ekstrom.
Well, so I'm curious if we actually need to do a motion to be able to have the robust discussion that we need to have about this.
Glenn's going to say yes. I would love to say yes. I think let's think about that for a second. So I think what we need to do is discuss our preferred plan. And I think that we also need to really say that we endorse all 3 plans in addition to identifying a third. So we could start with, and I would entertain a motion to say that we would endorse all 3 plans as put forward by the great committee.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Sounds like that was maybe member Wall or member Hollins. I couldn't tell. Okay. Okay. So discussion. Member Ekstrom, it sounds like you had something. Go ahead.
Actually, I have a few thoughts. So when there was a talk about a phased approach, and if students went back in phases, the first phase would last approximately 2 weeks. I think that's a little too short, given that we kind of see how things change within a 2-week time period. I think it would be better to have each phase or cohort for at least a month, and then phase in another month and another month, because that gives more time, better or worse, that gives more time for people's germs to move around and get to each other. And if everyone's okay, everyone's okay. And you'd see that over a little bit longer time period. I'm not speaking eloquently, but I'm hoping that we all gather what I'm.
I hear you. And we did have some of the school committee participated in a conference call with the mayors a couple weeks ago, and there was an excellent MGH infectious disease expert who spoke about this exact thing in terms of the timing. And when you're talking about the timing around the infection, I am not a public health expert, so she was much more eloquent, but she really talked about that really a month is more of the right timing to identify when something has really gone awry in terms of the infection rate. So I would say that your point has certainly some validity when you're talking about the public health issues for this. So noted. Other comments from the school committee?
Clarification, please.
Is that Member Hollins? Go ahead.
The motion was to endorse 3 models, but were there not 4 models? There was in-person, hybrid, remote, and remote plus that included.
Don't they sound like cell phone plans?
Supervised remote learning, the opportunity for families to work. But weren't there 4 models?
Superintendent Harper, would you like to clarify on this? Because I believe we can really only put forward 3 plans.
Could you just compare them to cell phone models?
It sounds like you're talking about cell phone plans. Like you could upgrade to Remote Plus.
I was thinking about airline seats.
Airline seats.
That's up there with Tia's description of Department of Education guidance, like back to school shopping. We were asked to create 3 plans, and so we did. But in the process of creating a remote plan, it felt like the phrase remote plan was inadequate to describe what we felt were essential components of in-person learning. So I recommend submitting them as is, but I think your point is well taken, that in a way you could create an alternative hybrid option that we're describing as remote plus. In other words, it's primarily remote, but it has components of in-person learning, which fits the definition of hybrid. So doesn't look like maybe traditional hybrid, but I hear your point about that. I think either way you submit it, the details of it are sufficient for this preliminary submission. Again, I want to be very clear with the public that even if the committee endorsed an option tonight, the commissioner has been clear that we are aware public health data is changing, and it is possible it could change in the future. We all hate to think about that, but this is a very initial submission of these 3 plans. And so I do recommend submitting it as is, even if we change how we describe it in our comprehensive plan documents due August 10th.
Thank you. Other comments from the school committee? Don't we have to send Member Ekstrom.
Oh no, go ahead, Jean.
I'm sorry. Member Wall, go ahead.
Don't we have to send in a recommendation for all 3 models, and then on the next go round we figure out, we send in what we really want to do? Is that the way it works?
That is my understanding, is that the state gets, and Jordana can be more eloquent about this, but the state gets some time to kind of hold all of our plans as proposed for ransom. And they've also They've also kind of threatened that they have the authority to pick our plan and tell us what we're going to do, which, I mean, anyone who knows anything about how all of this is going to actually work on the ground would say very clearly, no, the localities, the school districts, along with their a Department of Health in the locality, in our case in the city, would be the ones actually making the decisions and putting forward the approval, because this is a public health issue, and school folks are not experts on public health, and we need to work in concert. And we've all seen that DESE is only kind of a poser when it comes to being an expert on any of this. If anyone who's taken 5 minutes to just read a little bit of the guidelines can see that they don't spend time in classrooms, they don't spend time with children, and these are not realistic guidelines. So we, as the experts in terms of the school system and in concert with our public health folks, will ultimately, I am firmly believing, be able to make the decision. Although a few of us have been on a call with Commissioner Riley, who's the head of DESE, who's kind of said, oh, we have the ability to make that decision. I would call that bluff any day of the week. There is no way that DESE is going to be making a decision for any of these school districts, with the exception of those that are in receivership. That's it. And that is not us. We are not in receivership. So, I think we right now are going to, at the most tonight, I think what we would do is say, we feel like we've got 3 comprehensive plans that address the guidance satisfactorily and put those forward. And then, take some more time to see what happens with the numbers of cases, what happens in Franklin County specifically, what happens with funding and logistics and all of the other things that are in play, and then move forward with making a decision on the timeline as it was shown in the presentation and as we've talked about a little bit. But I appreciate the question, Member Wall.
May
Can
I
I
have
jump
a
in here?
follow-up?
Go ahead with your follow-up.
Tara,
Absolutely.
I'll comment when I have a chance to.
My concern is that we have not delved into what the cost of all of this would be, and that needs to be done. But for the state needs, we have an excellent proposal to send in, and I applaud all of the work that has gone into getting this proposal together. But as a committee, we need to get much further into it before we really can make a final decision.
I appreciate that. I think there has to be much more discussion. And Superintendent Harper and then Member Hollins, please.
Yeah. So I just want to say both of you are spot on. They're both true. So I'm reading from the Department of Education 2-step process for district fall reopening plans. It's in the packet, posted online on page 3. And I'm just going to describe step 1. I'm reading verbatim. Step 1, by July 31st, districts must complete and submit a preliminary reopening plan summary to DESE. Districts will fill out an online form that consists of 2 parts. They're outlined below. The form will allow the Department of Ed to collect key summary information about district's reopening plan. So in that, they are asking us for two things. One includes a preliminary recommendation, essentially. This preliminary opening plan is essentially what you're leaning towards. It is not a commitment, and I fully agree and support the need for further cost information. For example, tonight, we got confirmation about some state aid being at level funding from FY20 levels. That came out tonight. These materials were advanced, well before that, and that's important information. So I very much support an in-depth budget and finance discussion about each of them. We've provided some initial information, but I also want to say that we are in a accelerated timeline from the department, as always. We have done all of this work in a very short period of time in the last 35 days since they released their initial guidance, but only 2 weeks since they released the template. And the comprehensive plan documents are due on August 10th. So I'm going to ask that you at least indicate both to the department and I think to families that are really interested in knowing. You can call it a straw poll if you like, but I do think it would be helpful to share a preliminary preference, which doesn't commit the committee to enacting that, except that you need to continue to explore it. But that is what we've been asked to submit.
Members who wish to speak should probably say something verbally rather than raising their hands.
I'd like to speak.
Go, Susan.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say that I haven't read every single piece of advice that's come out because there have been so many, but I did read every parent letter carefully, and I listened tonight to every staff member speaking. And I've thought about this carefully, what I would do if I were a parent. And what's really clear to me is parents are going to make different decisions for their children, no matter what we do. And I think it's very fluid. I think the idea that a school district has to take every single parent with every single child and every single kind of health situation and come up with one model is ridiculous. As I said at the last meeting or the first meeting we had, we're always going to have a virtual option because there's some children that can't go into school or parents that will be too frightened to allow it. But even if so I actually think our model should be called Flex 2020, and we should educate according to what parents are choosing that they think is right. I think it will be very fluid. A parent who decides to send their children into the model where there's some in-school teaching, somebody gets sick, they need to be able to flip out. I don't mean flip out emotionally. I mean to switch for a month to something virtual. What's going to hold it all together is that we have a clear sense of curriculum. I'm making this up. If second graders are learning about trees, then it shouldn't matter if that's what they're doing in October, if they do it virtually or in school or in blended or whatever. If they're in school and the child gets sick, they should be able to go do the rest of the tree unit virtually. So we really need, I think, a sense of what our curriculum is and to be flexible because I think it's going to be very fluid. And I think parents are different. Our obligation is to educate everyone in town, not to force one model on everyone. So my idea is to submit something called Flex 2020, and that's our model, and that we go with parents and we adjust with our staff. What I noticed about the commissioner's letter, I read it twice, unless I missed it. I didn't see any mention of personnel, and that's huge. So I think something flexible and fluid would address all of our students and all of our parents and all of our staff. That's my thought. Not one way for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other school committee members? Any other
This is
discussion?
Katie. I would like to speak if there's a second.
Please.
So as I'm listening to everyone talk, it's really interesting because these are just the conversations we've been having in the great team for the 700 hours that we've been meeting. How do we meet everybody's needs? How do we meet our objective of educating everybody? That is our goal. That is what we are need to be doing, but we need to be doing it safely. And so I think what we were going back to with the DESE can't tell us that we have to do a plan that's less safe than we think. So if our Department of Health and Greenfield Board of Health, whatever, says you can only operate remotely because the caseload is too high right now, DESE, I don't think, can force us to go above that. But if we're running a hybrid plan, they can all say, shut the state down, we're done. So I always think of it like they can take away what we have, but they can't force anything on us. It's an important distinction that I think we all need to be aware of, that no matter what plan we start with on September 1st, it does not mean that that is the plan we will be running on October 31st. It does not mean that we will be running that plan on December 31st. So Member Holland's point is important. This needs to be flexible, but it needs to be flexible within our parameters of safety and financial ability to pay. If we can only afford to run a hybrid plan, we cannot offer parents a full in-person plan. We just can't. That's not an actual equity. That's not equitable to everybody in the district. if we can't maintain a remote plan safely, then we need to do other things. So the parents need the ability to choose, but think of it as choosing less than what we're offering, not more than what we're offering, maybe. And I think that an important distinction here is important, that I'm glad we voted this way, was to vote the 3 in and then maybe move forward, is that I am really in support of a remote start and a long phased in possible hybrid approach. And what I mean by that is everybody starts remote on the first day of school. Everybody gets their feet on the ground. All the teachers and educators get the PD they need. They get their feet on the ground. They understand where they're going and how they're ready to receive their students. And then from there, we move into the phase 1 of reintroduction. And then we move into phase 2. And then we move back if we need to, or we drop altogether, or we realize we're going a little too slow. I don't think that we should all think about this as a permanent decision made today, but we do need to make some sort of guidance to our team so they know what to do next. Should they be researching ways to get more tents, or should they be researching ways to get better remote learning platforms, or should it be everything? That's my speech for the moment.
I appreciate that, Katie. And also I really appreciate all your work that you did with the great team. It's obvious that you have put a ton of thought into all these different pieces and the moving parts. And I really value your opinion on this, and I think you expressed that very eloquently. So thank you. Other comments, questions from the school committee members?
Me, please.
Who's that, Member Ekstrom?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So as I look at all of these, one thing that occurs to me is, regardless of the form which we begin school, it seems to me, or format, it seems to me that we're going to have to change the way we teach. Meaning, I feel like and I could be wrong, and teachers out there correct me, it feels to me like almost everything would have to be project-based to allow for longer discussions or longer time to work on something, or to not need to specifically be in the classroom doing work. I could be wrong, and perhaps that doesn't work for like grade school math or whatever it may be, but it feels to me like that's something that we'd have to talk about. And as I look at these, I lean far more to remote plus and hybrid than I do any of the others. In person is going to be ridiculously expensive and would bankrupt the city, and would do the exact same thing for every other city and town and region in the entire state. So I can't imagine that will be the directive. I think that if if the governor says we're all going back to school, then and it's all in person, then that's what we have to do. If the governor says we're going to do a hybrid model, then that's what we're going to have to do. The governor says y'all are working from home, then that's what we have to do. I mean, these discussions are all wonderful, and I'm absolutely appreciative of all the work. I think anyone on the school committee knows that I was chomping at the bit to get some of this information, and you guys have done a really thorough job. But the reality is, the governor can tell us that we're all going to be living in our cars teaching our kids, and that's what we have to do. So I struggle with that a little bit. I think the hybrid model and remote plus would be great. I also want to say, though, that there are those special needs or high risk students that we keep talking about needing for them to be in. Fortunately, in my situation, Cameron, our daughter, really excelled with not being in school. And so while she would fall into that class of students that we want to get in the building, she actually did better at home. So she could do remote learning. And so there's some of those little nuances that are out there as well. Thank you.
I have a comment.
Member Johnson, and I have to correct myself. It's now Johnson Musad. Is that right? Sorry. Please go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure how much original thinking I have to share, just more of an appreciation for the great team and all the great work you've been doing. The plans are very impressive, and I think that we're thinking in bets here because we don't know what the future is. And I think, you can kind of see the different personalities of different people who have us landing in different spots. And it's actually not about, it's not about actually exercising judgment in a sense, in that we all have inadequate information. We can't tell the future. But my personal preferences are aligned with Member Karen's around the idea of starting with fully remote and kind of slowly ramping up and being prepared to ramp back down if there's an incident or if COVID cases spike, et cetera. And boards of health have very expansive powers for public health emergencies and could definitely shut whatever the heck it is we're doing or that the Department of Education wants us to do. They could shut that stuff down in a minute with their powers if they chose to exercise them. So, thank you.
Chair Parady, can I make a comment when there's a chance?
Please go ahead.
Two things. I just wanted to note that Kelly Dixon from the Health Department in the comment just wanted to clarify about the Department of Public Health stance, and also commented that it really is up to the community, as you said, and of course the local Board of Health, but she's just stressing that the Board of Health can always be more strict than the regulations, but just can't be less. So they're essentially minimum guidance. And to Member Ekstrom's question, I want to emphasize that no matter what model we adopt, we have really tried to accommodate parent choice. We want families to feel that they can make the choice that's right for their family. In some districts, the only way you can access remote learning if the district has gone to hybrid or in person is if you have a medical documentation or certification of a need to go to remote. That is not what the team is proposing. The team is proposing that there is a remote option for families if they want it, regardless of the reason. If their child has a medical condition or has underlying concerns or has an immune compromised people in the household, we're not, regardless of the reason, we're making sure that's available to the family. The same is true for bringing students in person, even if they're prioritized. So one, it's part of a team process to figure out how can we meet your child's needs. We can offer bringing them in, but if a child's need is better served at home, we're not going to force them to come in, to your point, Member Ekstrom. So there's flexibility in both ways there. We want to offer support, but it doesn't mean that a family has to accept them.
Well, if we
go ahead, Member Wall.
If we go with the remote plus, then we get to show the community that remote learning is possible and is a good thing because the teachers will have had the time to prepare. And then those students who have an impossible situation can be brought in first, whether it's a physical need or they don't have a place to do their learning. We can do them as the first group of people and then expand it if we have the ability to do that, or go backwards. So we can submit this plan that the great team has so brilliantly put together and then adapt it from remote plus forward, can't we?
Well, I think that kind of speaks to exactly what Member Hollins was getting to, right, with her Flex 2020 plan, is that this is really a dynamic thing that we're looking at. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Member Wall?
Yes, I mean, I think that the community does not understand that remote learning can be a positive thing. And if we start off with remote learning for a few weeks and show the community how good it can be, and then transition into the hybrid if the COVID-19 allows us to do that.
Sure.
And we need everybody back on stage. If we start with remote, we can get everybody back and start gearing up toward the plan of, let's say by January the 1st, we have all in-school learning because everything's going to be wonderful. Haven't we been told that?
It's all going to disappear like magic.
I know, magic is coming.
Second comment, please.
Member Hollins, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make just a couple of other thoughts. Michael Sustik, one of the teachers who spoke tonight, said something that was very interesting to me. I think he teaches kindergarten or grade 1, about how to start off he'd really like to meet the children. And for the youngest children, at least, I thought the idea that there might be some way outdoors that children could at least have a face-to-face, maybe 6 feet apart or 10 feet apart. I thought that was a great comment of just knowing that there's a real teacher. That's one. Secondly, I'd really like to see a virtual volunteer program. And the reason I mention that is, although I worry about every child, the two groups of children three I really worry about are the children who must learn to read by the end of 3rd grade. If not, their entire school career is compromised. And there are lots and lots of people who could be a mentor or a partner or a volunteer working with one family. We have lots of retired educators. And the other group are the students that are going on to college, and maybe they're taking AP physics and they really need a class. And there are people out there with this background who might be a mentor, a volunteer mentor for someone in some of these advanced courses. So I'd like to see us do something with volunteering. And the last thing is, what I liked about the Remote Plus model, that particular model, and I only looked at it briefly, it said something about a couple families working together, maybe in a pod. We have one of the parents who wrote to us said, you know, my wife and I both, the two parents both work, and they have more responsibility, and they have to have some option other than just being at home doing remote learning. And there may be a way that people can schedule the use of classrooms, a couple of families that have in-kind children, and they can share some of this responsibility among a couple of families with like interests. So again, I think we have to be flexible and find a way to educate all the children that works for us, works for them and their own situation. And thanks to everyone who did so much work. It was really great for me to hear so many teachers so thoughtful, and so many parents so thoughtfully writing their particular interests about this. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Member Hollins. Other discussion and questions from the school committee? Okay, I'm going to take a few minutes because I have actually some questions and comments, and I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I guess there's some technical things that I want to kind of talk about. So the buildings themselves, in terms of, we've seen what a challenge it will be for space. We've also learned, anyone who's paying attention in terms of the COVID-19 and how it spreads, that the air handling systems in buildings are spreading the virus. And what little I know, anyone who knows me knows I am not handy in the least. What little I know about air handling systems is that we have worked as a society to increase their efficiency by having them recycle air throughout a building, which is exactly what we do not want in this situation. I don't know if there is anyone on the line tonight that can speak to that. But I guess my question is, how do we use these buildings again safely, knowing that? And I don't know if Superintendent Harper has any sort of insight, or if there's anyone else on the line that has any sort of insight. And I'm not intending to put anyone on the spot. This is just something that if we were to bring kids back into buildings before we have a successful mitigation of the virus, like a vaccine, how would we actually do that?
I am not an expert on HVAC systems, and I absolutely rely on the expertise of our central maintenance and our facilities crew on this. I can say that both of them, I think, tried to be with us on the call. But what I can share, I mean, I can literally read to you from a number of emails that I have readily between George Vandelinder, Alan, and myself. And essentially the short answer is we're working with HVAC contractors, we're working with the systems controls, and we're improving airflow and quality as in taking in fresh air wherever possible. But there are some points at which you have to make decisions about how much to take in because it overloads the system and can actually damage the equipment. So there is a balance point there. Essentially, George describes it as if you take in too much air, it can actually freeze the coils, damage the system. And we've got really good and new equipment at the high school. Where heating and cooling systems are newer, generally speaking, they're in better shape. Where buildings are older, generally speaking, they're less airtight in that they're just generally they're leakier buildings. But from an airflow perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's generally more air in and out, and we're individually mechanically looking at opening windows, putting in fans, improving airflow. We've also ruled out some of the rooms where we don't feel that we can improve ventilation sufficiently. Most of these are interior rooms, and the guidance talks at length about essentially make them storage. Don't put, students or staff in them if you can't improve airflow sufficiently. So, I mean, not being an expert in it, I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to answer. I can say that the right folks are looking at it and we're improving it wherever possible. I can also say that I can't assure you beyond a shadow of a doubt that, the exchange of airflow is not in itself something that is a guaranteed safety. We're not a hospital. We are filtering. We're improving the quality of our filters. We're changing them more often. But these are older buildings that in some cases we're really upgrading. And that's the right word. We're investing in our buildings to make them as safe as possible. We're layering mitigation strategies. There is none of these strategies except for remote, and I'm not even talking about remote plus, except for remote, none of these strategies are guaranteed to keep everyone safe. And that's because our goal at the beginning, as we were asked, was to bring back as many students as possible. It wasn't to start by saying, how do we prevent anyone in the community from getting this? And those two balance points have been the push and pull, and that is the challenge that every single community is struggling with right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just tough. That's really tough to figure out. It's like we're kind of stuck with some of it until we have a vaccine, because I would imagine those contractors, those installers of that equipment will have issues if it's modified too much with being able to maintain and guarantee honor warranties and service contracts and whatever, all that good stuff that we love to talk about. Okay.
And I will say there's a liability issue in that a lot of people don't want to tell you here's the right setting because we are learning a lot about this virus. And so one of the notes I have from George says, they don't want to legally take the position of telling you the best way to operate the equipment. So in some districts where air quality concern has really been a concern and has been a sticking point for the community, they have looked to do outside studies, which are not cheap, but give you a more thorough across the board understanding from somebody who's technically versed in this and can evaluate it. I fully trust George and Alan. This is what they do all the time. But, an additional step some communities are taking, which the committee may or may not be interested in, is hiring outside people to evaluate it. It doesn't help with the timeline and getting the community answers right now.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question. Gosh, I just love, I mean, full disclosure, I just love the idea of a pavilion at each school. This becomes an asset after we're done. the bid is huge. It's completely out of our price range without even questioning it. I guess my question is around, is it something like this that might be eligible for grant funding in this new environment? Is it something that just like, is it totally out of the realm of possibility because of the quoting, or do we see that there could be any steps we could take to move forward? And I'm putting you on the spot, Superintendent, and I don't mean to do that, but I'm curious about if there's actually been any thought put into it once we saw the amount, the total quote.
I can tell you my initial reaction is that we need to put things in place that help us with students for the start of the year right away, which would, the rental of tents through Thanksgiving would take care of that while weather in New England is reasonable. We've had October 31st snowstorms before, so this is not a permanent solution, but having some outdoor tents will help quite a lot with the scenario Member Hollins talked about, starting kindergarten by meeting a teacher. I will say that pavilions at schools are really multi-use. They have a lot of benefits. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that would be potentially beneficial to the rec department in the schools and might be a good capital project. If there were federal funds that were available for COVID-related projects on this scale, I would absolutely, you know, apply these kinds of things towards it as part of a broader strategy. I think we need to know from a resources perspective, we can't equally prepare with all three scenarios at the same time. So we've done as much as we can that we would need to get, you know, masks, whether or not we're in person fully or hybrid. So we can plan for that. But we're at a point that we need to know how do we move forward with resources from here. So I think that would remain to be seen.
It's just a pipe dream. I fully admit that. And then I have one other question. And Superintendent Harper, if you want to tell me to push this to the new business item C around the budget, we can just stop and talk about it then. But I mean, my basic question is, how do we afford any of this? I don't understand where, you know, I think it's important to set this up a little bit too for the public that's listening. Many people are listening for the first time to all of this deliberation. And what folks may have missed is that when we settled on a budget for the schools for fiscal year 21, the mayor's budget, which is the mayor and the city council vote to approve a budget for the schools, was $1.8 million less than what the schools requested. So I want people to understand that right out of the gate, before we even figured out how we would pay for the expenses related to COVID, we had to cut almost $2 million from our proposed budget that really was just meeting the basic needs of the district with a small amount of growth in it. And now we're in a position where we have to buy PPE and we have to buy all kinds of new supplies and for cleaning and on and on and on. And we also obviously need brand new staff. And part of our cutting to the mayor's budget was to cut approximately 42 positions. So where is any of this realistic with the funding we have currently?
So I think our business manager was able to log in and is on the line. So I'll start.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit, Jordana. You're breaking up a little bit.
Is it better now? Can you hear me now?
No.
I can actually hear her okay.
Oh, you can? Okay, go ahead. Just keep going. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing is that
I am here too,
I think
Jordan.
it's really clear. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
Jump in if my audio gets bad too. I think it's really clear that cities and towns are struggling, and local communities may not have the ability to pick up where school budgets have to absorb all of these unanticipated costs. And so we've applied for grants whenever possible We have actively looked for opportunities to support PPE preparations. We have received some federal CARES Act money to help prepare the schools and purchase equipment that's necessary to keep staff and students safe. And we have to use those resources before we use local dollars and really use them well. So that's the first thing. The problem with many of those funding sources is that they're one-time funds. There was an award of approximately $400,000 in CARES Act federal money, which is $150,000 roughly went to Chromebook purchases, equipment like additional Wi-Fi hotspot access points for buildings, PPE, some of the software and subscriptions for remote learning. So it actually goes very quickly when you're looking at some of these price tags. The problem with staff and salaries, as I see it, is that when you commit to funding someone's salary, it's not generally done with one-time funds. If any of us have gone out and gotten a new job, you'd like to know that that job is going to be there in a year or 2 years, and that we have the funding to pay for a full year of that person's salary at least. We have an obligation if somebody's funding out of a grant, for example, we have to tell them up front that they're being funded out of a grant and that grant might go away. So we have put together in the packet, there's some very specific breakdown of all these funding sources and what's available. There are some reserves in the district. So if the committee votes, you know, on the particular model, we could deploy a bunch of resources towards it. I think in our conversation earlier with the city finance director, one of my concerns is, and it was echoed by several smart parents this evening, is if you put a lot of resources into the in-person model, not really fully knowing what's going to happen with the Student Opportunity Act money, that almost $2 million in state aid we were scheduled to receive this year. That was one of the things that we built our budget off. And we don't know about that. And we know that our Chapter 70 state aid is, which we rely mostly upon, is level funded, which looks to be about a $350,000 cut from what we were expecting it to be. Right, so we got 400,000 in federal and then 350,000. Right, so we're looking at all these numbers, and it's a little too soon.
Right? Sounds like they might be working together.
The short answer is there's a lot of moving parts, and it's not how we typically budget. And there are some real concerns. And when we send employment offers, we need to be able to, these people need to make decisions for their families. And I think all of that by my role of advising the committee about financial prudence. But I also know that tonight there are many employees who are waiting to come back to jobs that they love with kids that they want to serve. We're missing things like a nurse, a guidance counselor, special educators, second grade teachers, people that we need back no matter what model we're in. So simply put, this is a very hard position for districts to be in right now. We want our teachers back, and we want to have a budget that's balanced, that local community can sustain. And we want to use funds from grants and federal dollars if possible to make our schools safe.
Thank you.
Question?
Andy, did you want to add any?
Yeah, please, Andy, if you would.
No, I think between what she said and when we get to the chart at the discussion, it'll also give a more full picture as to where it is things are regarding the delicate balance of where we find ourselves, what we need to do without knowing which model we're doing. I mean, it's the ultimate cliche of building the plane while flying it.
Yes, it is. Member Hollins, was that you that said you had a question or a comment?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
I had two questions. One is, have we had any guidance from our liability insurer or our two attorneys that advise us on what they're recommending for school districts? Because I'm watching different kinds of legal action from parents and personnel over this type of issue. So I'm curious if we have any guidance from them. And the second thing is, it really would interest me to have a clear, well thought out policy on what we're doing with paying for for tuitions to special schools if they're not in session. It's a very large part of our budget. And I think what I see in Warren's is we're paying all of this, but if the full services that we agreed to in the tuition contract aren't provided, I'd love for us to have a policy on carefully thought out how we're using that 3 to 4 million or whatever it is in payments. Something thoughtful. Thank you.
Just to answer the first question, I've raised this to the city because our insurance is linked to the city's policy, and they're exploring the limits of our liability if a student or staff member were to become ill, despite measures and protections that the district is taking. And on the second matter, I fully support a policy on that. And I do want to recommend that a budget and finance subcommittee be formed post haste, given that we just got those numbers on Chapter 70. This would be a very good time. Literally, that came out in the hour before this meeting. Notification that's been posted to the Division of Local Services. So this would be a good time to explore those numbers.
You mean
so we
for the committee to have a meeting is what you're saying?
Yeah, have a meeting. And
I think we need a lot of meetings, really. We should be active.
Yeah. So let's have a budget and finance subcommittee meeting next week. Member Ekstrom, if you would kind of put that together, that would be awesome.
I will.
And so the public is aware, just like meetings like this one tonight, our special school meeting or school committee meeting or our regular school committee meetings, when we have subcommittee meetings, they are also public. The agendas and the information are also posted at least 2 days ahead of time. And you are able to come and do public comment at any subcommittee meeting. So you should be aware that those are function the same way as these meetings do, if you're interested in learning more and participating more, listening more. Any other questions or comments from the school committee about the motion that's on the table? Okay, so recording secretary Farber, would you be so kind, since we kind of dragged on a little bit there, would you be so kind as to read that motion back to us? She's there somewhere. I know she is. Susan Farber. I know you're here.
Farber.
I know it said 3.
Let's see. Susan, are you on mute maybe?
It doesn't show her as being on mute in the list of participants.
Okay. I hope we didn't lose her entirely, because that would be a bummer. Okay, so the motion on the table, as I recall, is we move to endorse the three. Oh, move to endorse.
There it is.
There it is. Okay. Can someone read that?
Move to endorse all 3 plans as put forward by Great.
As put forward by the committee. Okay. So we will be voting on that. Member Johnson Musad, would you please do a roll call vote?
Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Yes.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Proietti?
Yes.
Well, and motion carries.
Wonderful. So that passes unanimously. And what we have just done, just to recap for people who are on the phone and listening, is we have endorsed the 3 plans to move forward to be submitted to DESE. Okay, thank you all for that. Someone
Amy,
is talking, yes.
Yeah, it's Susan. So do we have to select X model as our preferred return to school option as well? Or is it, and Jordana, perhaps that's a you question?
I don't think we have to do that yet, but Jordana, please clarify for us. Oh, I wonder if we lost the superintendent. Let's see.
You haven't lost me. I'm here.
Oh, So I think we already
You have
talked
to
about this.
indicate which, we did. Whichever one you're leaning towards will have to be indicated on the form.
And is that indicated when you submit tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. So
It's a preference. It's a leaning towards. It's a draft.
So I would entertain a motion. Secondarily, let's entertain a motion for identifying a preferred model. So when I hear your motion, I would want you to move to endorse X model as our preferred model.
I move to endorse the remote learning model as our preferred model.
Second.
Second from Member Wall.
Oh.
And discussion.
Does that mean also remote plus?
Yes. The way it was described, yes.
Hybrid.
It's remote plus if you add a second line, right? If it's like a cell phone plan. That's
right.
a joke. That's just a joke. Okay, so the motion on the table is to indicate.
Get wider seats then too.
Right, indicate that remote is our preferred, which also includes remote plus. Any discussion or questions from the school committee members?
I'll just say why I'm putting that forward. I guess just the idea that any of the plans that we have are going to have to involve some element of remote. Even the full plan was going to involve parents being able to opt to have their students, which essentially means all the options are some version of a hybrid. But I think the idea of starting with the fully remote and ramping up makes the most sense, because it then gives you the experience to be able to ramp back down, which I fully expect will happen as soon as someone gets sick or dies in any school system in Massachusetts. So that's why my mind went there, is the place that I'm leaning towards.
Thanks, Member Johnson-Musad. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, let's move to a vote on that.
This is Katie. Sorry. Would it be okay if I spoke?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to vote yes for this, but I think that what member, I'm going to say it wrong, new last name, Johnson-Musad said is really important, that we are planning, we are leaning towards a start of a remote plan. That does not indicate our desire to never switch to a hybrid model, but our desire to get our feet on the ground, make sure we're following everything, make sure we have the money, make sure our students are set up for success safely, and then moving forward. And just sort of taking into account what we were talking about earlier with the Harvard, I believe it was the Harvard doctor speaking to us on the commissioner's call a couple weeks ago, that everything's a month later. So we see numbers ramping up right now for a July 4th problem. So we need to sort of wait and see what's going to happen for an early August thing at the beginning of September.
Another comment?
Member Karen. And I do think Member Karen's it ties back to what she so eloquently said earlier in the discussion about this is a dynamic plan. We're not voting to endorse something and then as preferred and then keep it forever and ever and never change. As things move forward, we need to have a dynamic structure in place to be able to respond to protect the safety of the community. And Member Holland, you had a comment or a question?
I was just going to say the reason I'm voting for it is because the remote plus allowed for adapting for parent needs. We've had some parents who said they're going to have to leave the district if there's no other option because they can't do it. And I just think we have to consider that too. So the remote plus sounded like it was listening to what parents needed as well.
Thank you for that. Other questions or discussion or comments from the school committee? Okay, so let's move to a vote on this. We are voting on, hang on, I will read. For all who heard me struggle at the beginning, I did finally find where I can see the chat here on my iPad. Okay, so the motion is we move to endorse the remote learning model, which includes Remote Plus as our preferred model. And Member Johnson Musad, if you would do a roll call vote, please.
Member Karen,
Takes me so long to unmute. Yes.
okay. Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prayati,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful. Good work, folks. Is there anything else we need to address at this point with the reopening plans? That's new business item A. Or can we move on to the changes to the school year calendar? I think we're good, right? I'm just, for people who are hearing my silence, I'm just looking through our notes about how to move through the meeting tonight. I think we're good. I think we can move on to B. Superintendent Harper, do you agree with me?
I do.
I do.
Okay, great.
That was Susan. That's right down on my side.
Two people are talking. I have no idea what's happening.
Everyone's agreeing.
Okay, great. So let's move on to business item B, changes to the school year calendar. So there has been a much publicized move from DESE. The commissioner has authorized to reduce the 180-day standard requirement for student attendance to 170 days for the fiscal year of 21. And what we would need in this case would be for the school committee to amend the school calendar to reflect an additional 10 days of safety training and professional development that has been approved by the commissioner at the beginning of the school year, with the first day for students now beginning on, is it September 14th? Do we have to determine that yet?
I think you want to do two motions.
Oh, okay. So you want to do one to amend the school calendar and then one to determine the new start date?
I think that's a safer option. In the event we have to move the start date even further for whatever reason.
You're so smart. Okay.
Wicked smart.
Wicked smart. You can tell when I say that I'm not actually from Massachusetts originally, but I digress.
Right, I got you.
Okay, so first motion would be to move to amend the school calendar to reflect 10 additional training and professional development days at the beginning of the school year.
So moved.
Member Ekstrom with the motion and a second.
Second.
Member Johnson Musad with the second. And any discussion? I had my fingers crossed that there would be silence on that one. Let's move to a vote on that.
Member Karen,
Member Karen?
My speed keeps cutting out. Sorry. I am a yes.
all right, Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prayati,
Yes.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. So we would move into the second motion. The first day, I move that the first day of school for students will now begin on. And, ooh, who is that? Someone's got to be muted. I don't know what that was. You got to love my commentary, guys. You take it or leave it, okay?
I do.
It's highly entertaining for a lot of people, I think. I'm going on the road,
Take your
actually,
weight
after I
down.
finish my tour as chair. I'm going on the road with this one. So the current first day of school is it the 31st? Is it before Labor Day? Help me out.
it's
Is it the
September
second?
2nd.
The second. Okay.
It's September 2nd for grades 1 through 2. And it is, kindergarten begins on the 4th.
And
There is a caveat here.
Please, go ahead.
So there you go.
Just copied and pasted something received from the commissioner literally this evening. So it is 10 additional days, but it provides the caveat that's in the chat box. Sorry, I cut off the very beginning of it, but it's a memo from the commissioner. So you have to start instruction by September 16th. And if you don't start by September 16th, you have to apply for a waiver. So the 10 days from our start date would bring us to the 17th because we're scheduled to start after Labor Day on the 2nd. So we would have to apply for a waiver if we wanted to school on the 17th. His blanket waiver gives you 10 days up to September 16th.
So knowing that, Superintendent Harper, how would you think do you think it's safe that we could say, yeah, we'll apply for the waiver and we'll get it?
I
even in a pandemic, come on.
Well,
we apply for what we
September
want, and
2nd,
if they don't give us the waiver, we can always vote again.
Okay. Gosh,
Well,
why does this have to be? Of course, because it's a
wait,
pandemic. Yes,
wait.
go ahead.
How about if we just say that the teachers start on September 2nd with students starting on 9/17 or September 3rd, whatever it is, that would be 10 days prior. No, we'd have to go to the 16th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Teachers would start on September 2nd. Students to start on the 16th.
They'd have to start on the 17th because that's only, if they start on the 16th, that's only 9 days.
Correct.
Well, so I'll go, okay, so September 1st then.
I have a question.
Member Hollins.
Someone just wrote in and suggested that maybe the days be split. If we do go from remote back to something, keeping a remote option that's more school-based, will we not want a couple days then to prepare? So that's the thought someone just wrote.
I don't like the role of representing what the Department of Ed says all the time. I'm just the dutiful messenger here. It's really my understanding that the goal of these days is to provide necessary training before the start of the school year. It's sort of like use them by September 16th or apply for a waiver. It's not the idea that we can bank and use them for later. I think this makes the most sense, but it's also my understanding that that is not part of the waiver as it was granted. So 6 of one, half dozen the other, we can certainly apply for the waiver. We were granted 10 days. We can apply for a waiver to start the following day. You'd have to amend the calendar if it wasn't voted back to the 16th, or you can vote that it will begin not sooner than the 16th. And if we get the waiver, you can come back and say it starts the 17th. Again, either way, there is a potential because we would have to submit that information, that waiver request. I think at least if you move it to the 16th, families know clearly and can plan that we're not beginning instruction prior to the 16th, and that time will be used for professional development for staff. If we're in person, this is primarily physical safety and protocols. If we're remote, this is primarily instruction and professional development that makes our remote learning effective and robust. New platforms, technology, so forth, as well as our commitment to anti-racism training at the district level.
I think I have a motion.
Go for it, Glenn.
Yes, please.
Okay. I move that we change the calendar so that this first day of school would now be beginning on September 16th for grades 1 through 12, and would we still say September 22 for kindergarten, Jordana?
I think don't, wait, okay, so does kindergarten count within has to start before the 16th? Because they always start 2 days later, right?
We can't hear you,
Left
Jordana.
generic and said 2 days later.
Oh, Jordana, if you're talking, we can't hear you at all.
She's laughing and saying, I know, la la la.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can.
I would keep it 2 days later. So if you start on the 17th, sorry, if you're starting on the 16th, then move kindergarten to the 18th. If you're starting on the 17th, start kindergarten on the 21st.
And if we start kindergarten later than the 16th, we would not need to apply for the waiver. That would be okay because everyone else already started. How would
It
you
would
know,
make sense
right?
to me if it's, I can't say, but the argument is clearly that this is our school calendar. Kindergarten starts 2 days later. That time is necessary for kindergarten screening and so forth.
Yeah.
We need to advance the whole calendar 10 days. It doesn't change the school committee's previous start to kindergarten 2 days later.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm ready with my motion again, this time for real.
And I'm forgetting, was there already a motion on the table that we would need to withdraw? Right?
No.
No?
Didn't get that far.
Johnson Musad let us start without a motion on the table?
We were starting to get the motion on the table when they issued new guidance. They'll probably issue new guidance before we're done with this one.
Right? Check your email, Jordana.
Glenn, I'm looking at you for this.
Anyway, okay, so I move that we change the calendar so that the first day of school for students now beginning on September 16th for grades 1 through 12 and September 18th for kindergarten, and request that the superintendent apply for a waiver for to start September 17th for grades 1 through 12 and September 22 for kindergarten. So that we amend the calendar now, but also direct the superintendent to apply for the waiver so that we can get that the full 10 days.
Okay. I want to make sure that, do we have a second? Sorry.
Second.
I want to make sure Susan Farber has what she needs for us to move on.
Did member Johnson Musad say 21st or 22nd for kindergarten? I believe it's the 21st, member Johnson Musad, because if we start on the 16th and we go back 2 days later, that's Friday the 18th. If we start on the 17th, that's a Thursday. 2 days later is Monday the 21st.
Yeah, whatever you just said, that's fine. Yeah, appreciate the correction. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the calendar.
Okay, so the motion is on the table with the second by member Karen. Any discussion, clarification, questions?
Member Hollins is raising her hand, but please speak up if you want to talk. Don't raise your hand.
You got to do more than raise your hand. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. I'll vote for this, but it really troubles me. I think the education was greatly compromised last year anyway. And we have students in special ed and younger children. They really need the time. So 10 days just seems like a lot. And I'll vote for it if everyone wants it, but I really regret that we're cutting another 10 days out of education. If we could just use a week. But
well, I have a comment related to that. What's really important to remember about all of what we are working on right here is our educators are unionized, and they are not only negotiating at the local level with us what we call impact bargaining on their contracts because so much has changed. But it's been in the press widely that they are also negotiating at the state level directly with DESE. So we cannot, at this point, go forward with anything that really compromises that 10 days. I think you really risk that it creates a problem that's going to be hard to get around to actually get our students back into school, however school looks. That I say back into school, if you can see my air quotes, because it may be remote. But I think it's really important to understand that this did not come out of the blue. This clearly was negotiated at the state level with DESE, with the teachers in mind.
Could I say something further?
Please.
I think the teachers would prefer to get back on day one, and I think they're clear that they also need the training. As you heard from several educators earlier tonight, there are a lot of people already doing training over the summer. The main difference, and the reason that I do support this, is cost. To bring all of the district back for 10 days of training is very costly if it's done before the school year starts, because that means it's outside of their contractual days. So the commissioner's change here allows us to, basically, these are already budgeted costs. And we recognize that these are days that students wouldn't be getting face-to-face, but we think the quality of what teachers will be able to provide after they've had the benefit of training is really worthwhile. So I do really want to say that this is not to make light of the fact, speaking as a parent, I really understand that 10 days feels like, oh gosh, it's been a long haul, and now 10 more days. It's not meant to be a slap in the face. It's really meant to take seriously that teachers are doing a lot on their own, volunteer and on their own time, and they actually deserve quality professional time that's well organized to avoid what happened in the spring, so that they can do a good job for students.
Thank you.
Another comment.
Please, Member Johnson-Musad.
Just that, as elected officials, I think that we're here to vote as well as we can in the best interests of the people who voted us in. And I just want to say that I don't think we should feel any pressure as school committee members to vote just in order to appear to be in agreement. If folks disagree, if you don't think this is the right plan, vote against it. I personally think it's important to vote that way. So I just wanted to share that comment.
Thank you.
This is Katie. May I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
This may not be a question yet because contracts are still going to need to be negotiated. But typically our teacher contracts are for 183 days. Is that correct? Is that a question I can ask?
That sounds right to me. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm nodding. Yes.
Okay, great. So their first day of school their first day back won't actually change. It's just that we will give them extra training, which they will very much need on remote platforms, how to clean their classrooms, how to, on top of all of the other really important training we need to talk about for anti-racism training. So I'm all for the 10 days. I'm absolutely in support of that. But I just wanted to clarify that their first day of work would still be the same.
That is, yes, that is what we're moving forward on.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, so let's move to a vote on this. Member Johnson-Musad, please with the roll call. Glenn, are you there? You're on mute.
I'm on mute. Member Karen.
Yes, this time I wasn't on mute.
Vice Chair Ekstrom.
Yes.
Member Hollins.
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prayati.
Yes.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all. Okay. Ooh, that item B, that was like lightning speed compared to the rest of the agenda so far. We're moving along nicely. Okay, so we are up to, and it's only 9:09. Look at that. Fiscal year 21 budget update and discussion. Who's doing this? Jordana, Andy, what do we got here?
Andy, do you want to talk a little bit about your document?
Sure. So in your packet is an update on FY21, in addition to year-end closing information based on the balances that we are projecting for year-end that will roll over into FY21. I'm not going to read through in detail the memo. You have it for reading, but I can tell you that it's the devil being in the details is on a chart that follows, which is the funding sources. I know the discussions about can we afford, plan A, B, or C, or C, enhanced C, or whatever you want to call it. So what I did was I went through the budget with the ending balances as we've closed the year, and then looked at where things were as far as the funding sources that we are getting, including the two COVID-related relief funds. I'd say the ESSER funds and the actual COVID relief fund grants. Those are included in the chart, as well as the other standard revolving accounts and the projected grant balances that we have going into FY21. I do say, as I do say in the memo, though, that I consider this kind of the first level worst case scenario, to coin my own phrase on that, because mapping out the costs, as evidenced by all that you heard tonight, is very complex, and the range in which is why, honestly, across the state, you're not seeing many people put in costs regarding their plans, because as guidance changes, as we've seen tonight, almost every hour. But what the purpose of the chart was to kind of show you that there are funds available, but we need to be judicious in the fact that, as we also know, this is not a one-year issue. This is something that we know is going to carry on into FY22 and potentially beyond. So I mapped through on that chart, if you look and see, and with some comments regarding where things are and what it is that we're projecting. I can tell you the column of the projected uses, I took that straight from the budget document that was left for me by Mr. Nemberkow. So there are some things in there that do need to be researched, but the bottom line being, when you look at it, these are in total, I'll say there, because there are some things, as I say, that based on what we know for grants and what was in the budget, some adjustments do need to be made, and we are going through and doing those now. But for all intents and purposes, these are the funds that are available as we're discussing what next year is going to look like under what model, and or how it is that we could potentially fund those.
Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Yes.
Questions or comments or discussion from the school committee members? I don't think we need to actually have any sort of motion and vote here, but let's see what's on your mind.
You're correct. This is really informational. So to give you some more context as we continue down the discussion of models that we're going with, and as information starts to come even further into light, how is it that potentially we could look to fund whatever direction the committee chooses to go in?
Thank you. I actually would start with a question, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the committee. The emails around all of this are a little bit hard to keep track of, but I think I saw something around the extended learning time grant, and that may not be renewed for this year, or may not be renewed in the full. And it's hard to tell from this report because the grants aren't listed by name if we have anything in that.
I can tell you, because of the unknown status, and also because I'm going to say the unique nature of that grant, I did not include that in there because I almost consider that, I would say, like a standalone, to some extent, program as to what it is. And when you go through the budget there weren't any offsets that were specifically designated to the ELT grant. So that's why that is not included in here. And I
Thank you.
apologize. I can tell you the numbers. The 240 grant is the special education 94,142. The 262 is early childhood. 305 is Title I. The 140 grant is Title IIA. 309 is Title III. And the 391 is a grant that isn't renewed anyways, but it's a
Okay.
Central Schools Health
No,
grant.
that's helpful. Thank you very much. Other questions or discussion from the school committee members?
I have a question.
Please.
I'm just wondering where the line item is related to the school resource officer. We have asked the superintendent to work with the police department on not having that position in the school, and where is that on this budget and what happens to it going forward?
It would not be on that Excel chart that I have, and I do not believe it is in our budget. I'm looking through the lines now to see, and I don't remember there being a line item for it. Give me a.
It's on page 7. It's on page 7 of the Munis report.
The truant officer?
Which page 7?
Which page 7? Page 7 of the Munis report. Yeah.
Okay.
On the
Yeah,
left,
it is the truant officer.
133-111-00-5100 truant officer. And that line reflects the historical MOU between the schools and the police for a SRO position. There's a state requirement for a truant officer and a school resource officer. And that is how the portion of it that's been on the school side has been reflected in the past. And as you all know, the funding for the school resource officer has been removed on the city side. And this committee tabled the discussion last time to come back and look at that and how we might better utilize those funds. I think certainly in light of tonight's discussion, it's clear that there is quite a wide range of needs for those funds. And that's before we've even started to talk about transportation, which I would ask you all to entertain a moment at some point tonight based on the report you got from Ed about the cost of transportation.
Thank you.
Can I address that a little bit?
Please, go ahead, Member Exton.
That actually is going to be my next comment. So as I'm looking at this, beginning balance for school transportation is $47,898. Projected as of the school committee approved budget, $270,500. What Ed gave us tonight, transportation could be, and probably will be more, 2.5 million increase. So that kind of changes the playing field a little.
Yeah, I mean, this transportation line on the chart is just a transportation revolving account. It's not the overall transportation budget. So that's why I write in the comments that there's more research needed on that, because just even on the revolving account, the fact that I did not see in any of the documents left for me by Mr. Nemberkow any projected funding sources coming in based on the revolving account and the transportation that we might do elsewhere. I know we do that. So, but it's just one of the things that I said, I would say that that's another worst case scenario where any funds that we end up getting for transportation for what we do for other potentially other districts or what have you would just offset that quote unquote negative 222.
Right.
And or again, also, if you're taking that school transportation revolving account as part of offsetting the transportation budget as a whole, you're absolutely right that that's we've got bigger things to deal with when we're talking about what the numbers that Ed had put forward underneath the transportation scenarios.
Yeah. Thank you.
Comment?
Please, go ahead.
Could I ask that tonight's financial report and the issue of transportation and special ed tuitions be considered for the budget subcommittee agenda?
You sure can.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments or discussion about the budget information? Okay.
If I just have one comment, I guess I would highlight that if you look on the FY20 budget, if you remember the quote unquote deficit from the last report, as we predicted, that resolved itself to, as of the running of this report, it's back at a positive balance, and we're again continuing year-end closing entries so that we could save those monies in other areas, so that we're solvent and any little bit helps for the coming year. So just wanted to bring that to your attention regarding the FY20 portion of the report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andy, I do want to say that there isn't a whole lot of discussion around budget this evening, so I think we're all a little bit overwhelmed or tired or whatever. I expect that we will go through this with a fine-tooth comb more so during the budget committee meeting, which we're planning for next week. So anyone who's listening out there in radio computer land, we'll have a budget meeting next week when we can set it up. If we can't, then believe me, it'll be the next week. And we will be going through our budget, asking 9 million questions that are uncomfortable and make all of us want to squeal at that point.
Thank you. And thank you, Andy. We appreciate all your hard work for us.
No problem.
All right. So we do have a plan for an executive session that we do need to tackle on the agenda tonight. And I will read the reasons, and then we will take a vote to go into executive session. And we will return to this call after the executive session. There may be votes that we will take in public session once we return. And we have no way of knowing how long that will be. We will not be doing the executive session on this call. We will move to another platform and another conversation to keep that private. But if you would like to stay on this call and wait for us to come back, you absolutely can do that. I just unfortunately can't give you any time for when that will be done. We are calling executive session tonight for Massachusetts General Laws C30A, subsections 21, exemptions 2 and 3. Number 2 is to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Or exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I do declare. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
So
moved.
And a second. Wonderful. A roll call vote, please. Member Johnson Musa.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes. Can we have a 10-minute break?
Oh, now you're causing trouble. Let's just vote first.
Fine. Yeah, because normally I don't cause trouble.
Collins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prietti,
Yes.
Member Wall.
yes.
It's unanimous. We can go into executive session.
And you should have, I just want school committee members to remember that you have a invitation to this session that is in the Google Meet platform. And we should meet over there. You should have gotten that earlier today, because full disclosure, I forgot to set up a separate WebEx for the school committee meeting or for the executive session, and Superintendent Harper caught it because she's good like that. Okay, 10-minute break. Do we want to vote on it? No, I'm just kidding. 10-minute break. So we will be in there 9:34, please.
Okie dokie.
Thank
on TV yet, and we started motion to adjourn.
I forgot I had my headphones on this device. Ay, ay, ay. Awesome. So we are back. The executive session has ended. We did not take any votes that need to be, we didn't take any votes, so we didn't take any that need to be restated here. I would entertain a motion to adjourn from a school committee member.
So moved.
Second.
Member Karen?
Fudge.
Dean?
Member Ekstrom?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes.
Member Hollins?
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prietti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The meeting is adjourned at 9:53 p.m. Thank you all for sticking with us. Thank you all to the public who was here and stuck with us. We appreciate your engagement. Everyone have a great night. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay, bye.
Thanks to you, Amy. Great meeting. Bye-bye.